Hey guys, tonight we're dimming the torches and turning the pages back to two corners of history that probably never rubbed elbows, but might just keep you awake out of curiosity before lulling you back to sleep. Before we start, go ahead and make yourself comfortable. Adjust your blanket, grab a drink of water, and remember to breathe like someone who's got absolutely nowhere else to be. If you haven't yet, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. No algorithm sacrifices required. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Statistically, someone out there is watching this at 2 a.m. with headphones half dangling and a cat sitting on their chest. Now, let's set the mood. Switch on a fan for that soft hum, or crack a window if you want some authentic background noise. The kind that sounds like oak branches scratching secrets against the glass. Tonight's story drifts between firelight and empire, superstition and final words. We're heading first into the smoky skies of the Middle Ages, and then sweeping east to the marble-lit deathbed of Alexander the Great. Together, they'll remind us that history is less about certainty and more about what people believed while they were too busy surviving to fact-check themselves. So, witches. Real ones? Probably not. Believed in ones? Absolutely. For a few strange centuries across Europe, accusations of witchcraft spread faster than any plague. Midwives with knowledge of herbs, widows with opinions, or simply whoever your neighbor disliked on a damp Tuesday, could find themselves branded as servants of the devil. But here's the mildly interesting twist. Not every witch was doomed to pyres and pitchforks. When parts of Europe grew too hot, figuratively and literally, some fled toward the misty edges of England. Why there? Because England, surprisingly, lagged behind in the whole prosecution trend. Local courts preferred paperwork to bonfires, and many supposed witches found anonymity in the dense forests and soggy villages that barely noticed newcomers. We'll wander those moors together in a moment, past the murmurs of charms and the faint smell of damp rosemary. You can almost hear the rustle of skirts, the click of talismans, the quiet defiance of people who refused to let fear define them. Then, once the last candle is out, we're going to leap continents and centuries to stand beside a different kind of myth. A king whose last breath was as debated as his conquests. Alexander the Great, lying in Babylon, surrounded by generals already dividing his empire like vultures pretending to prey. His final words, or the many versions of them, have fueled arguments for 2,000 years. Did he name a successor? Did he whisper a riddle? Or did his silence speak louder, reminding everyone that no empire survives the hour after its architect is gone? We'll explore. That echo, too. The hush after glory, when even the greatest figures of history stop being alive and start being stories. So take a deep breath. Let your shoulders sink. The candlelight just flickered lower, and our time machine creaks softly as it tilts toward the past. Whether you're here for the witches, the conqueror, or just the sound of words curling at the edge of sleep, you're in the right place. All right, ready? Let's drift through the mildly interesting corridors of history and see what shadows hum behind them. Chapter 1. The Lantern and the Fog. The rain started hours ago. Not the polite drizzle that lets poets feel melancholy and comfort, but the kind of rain that seems personally offended by roofs. You tug the hood of your cloak lower against the cold, thinking vaguely how a good waterproof jacket would have been an exceptional invention for the Middle Ages, right up there with soap and emotional literacy. The path ahead is more puddle than road, gleaming under the half-hearted glow of your lantern. Each step squelches with the conviction of a boot full of regrets. The fog presses in close, thick, milky, and audibly damp, if that's possible. You can't see 5 feet in front of you, which is problematic because the last signpost you passed was shaped like something that might once have been human. It pointed both east and west, and was clearly made by someone who thought maps were witchcraft. The woods whisper in every direction. You keep walking because that's what the living do in medieval times. They keep walking and hope the forest decides not to include them in a ballad. Somewhere to your left, an owl hoots mournfully, the kind of sound that says, "No one here has dental care." The mud deepens until you're certain you're slowly sinking into a moral lesson. Each pull of your foot comes with a dreadful sucking sound, nature's reminder that you should have gone into accounting instead of wandering through supernatural fog at night. You picture historians, centuries later, looking at your bones and sighing, "Ah yes, another idiot with a lantern." You pause to catch your breath, which is immediately stolen by the wind anyway. The lantern flickers. You tap it gently, as if affection might encourage fire to obey. The tiny flame shivers inside the glass, an orange dot of rebellion against the endless gray. You think back to your comfortable 21st century existence, electricity, microwaves, and snack foods that never spoil, and wonder when exactly you volunteered for this historical internship. The road dips, then climbs. Your cloak, now heavier than your taxes, clings wetly to your shoulders. Somewhere behind you a wolf gives a low growl, or perhaps a stomach protesting dinner made entirely of despair. Either way, you quicken your pace. Up ahead, the fog parts for a fraction of a second, revealing a crooked milestone that someone, with what can only be described as pessimistic honesty, has carved the word maybe. You consider the craftsmanship. Definitely local work, definitely not comforting. A far-off church bell tolls midnight, though you're certain it's been midnight for at least 4 hours. Medieval timekeeping is like that, based more on vibes than precision. Your lantern sputters again. You shield it with your hand, whispering a litany of encouragement that sounds suspiciously like you talking to your houseplants back home. As the path narrows between skeletal trees, your mind drifts toward the philosophical. What exactly is fog? Vapors from haunted souls? Condensed regret from a nearby village? And why, in every historical painting, does the fog look romantic when in reality it smells faintly of damp cheese? Your foot catches a root. You stumble, curse creatively, and nearly lose the lantern. For a terrifying moment, you picture yourself crawling through the dark mud like a worm with aspirations. Then, miraculously, you spot light ahead, faint, golden, the glow of civilization, or possibly another apparition with different branding. You approach carefully. The light resolves into a tiny inn, roof sagging but stubbornly upright. A candle in each window, like hope doing its best on a shoestring budget. A wooden sign swings above the door, the half-conscious pilgrim, the kind of establishment that promises nothing except not dying outside. Inside, the warmth hits you like forgiveness. The fire crackles, a welcome chorus of pops and sighs. You peel off your soaked cloak, which lands on the floor with a splat that could wake the dead, or at least the local health inspector, if such a person existed. The innkeeper nods without speaking, the international signal for "we don't ask questions after dark." You hand over 2 coins, one shiny, one suspiciously sticky, and receive a cup of ale that tastes like liquid bread with a side of regret. In the far corner sits a cloaked figure much like yourself, lantern on the table, steam rising from their boots. They glance up briefly, offering the solemn look of someone who has also recently quarreled with the weather. Outside, the fog presses against the windows, eager but disappointed, like an ex trying to ruin your evening. You take a long sip of ale and feel the warmth move through you, slow, deliberate, like a memory returning in stages. Maybe, you think, this isn't so bad. Maybe the road was just testing you, as all medieval things do. And if tomorrow the rain starts again, at least you'll know the way to the half-conscious pilgrim. You set the lantern down beside the fire, the flames settling to a steady, sleepy glow. It flickers once, gratefully, and goes still. Outside, the fog sighs. Inside, you finally start to defrost, realizing that somehow the worst night in medieval history might become a decent bedtime story after all. Chapter 2. Brother Reginald's Crisis of Faith. You wake to bells, ancient, heavy, and unsympathetic. The monastery courtyard hums faintly with dawn and damp air. Somewhere a rooster announces mixed feelings about sunrise. Brother Reginald, your assigned identity for this particular medieval misadventure, groans and pulls himself from a straw mattress that feels like sleeping on low-budget granola. The world outside smells of candle smoke, cold stone, and the faint undertone of cabbage stew that has somehow transcended time. As you shuffle down the cloister corridor, bare feet slapping the icy floor, you mentally compose the day's complaints. It is barely 6 a.m., and you're already bored with eternity. You reach the chapel. It is hauntingly beautiful in that, please enjoy our damp Gothic acoustics sort of way. Shafts of pale light pour through unwashed glass. The echoes of chant practice float through like Gregorian ghosts rehearsing for the choir of regret. Brother Gerard, the choir master, signals you to join the monks as they chant the morning psalm. The sound is deep, resonant, and just off enough to feel human. Notes rise, fall, hang, and occasionally surrender. You open your mouth on cue and add what can only be described as spiritual mumbling. You used to believe, at least that's what Reginald's older self insists. Once the idea of divine purpose warmed him like a good wine. Now it merely smolders, a dying ember in a cold hearth. He whispers prayers out of habit, like checking his phone when bored. After the service ends, everyone disperses into their assigned tasks. Brother Anselm tends the herb garden. Brother Gerard practices humility while subtly bragging about perfect pitch. You, Brother Reginald, are on manuscript duty, copying holy texts with ink that permanently stains regret into your cuticles. You sit in the scriptorium, that echoing studio of concentration and complaints. Wax candles drip onto nothing ever important, and the smell of parchment mixes with the faint tang of ego. You dip your quill, steady your hand, and copy, "Blessed are the meek," pausing to wonder when exactly meekness became such an exhausting hobby. Outside, the wind moans through the narrow windows like an unpaid intern. You survey your fellow scribes. Brother Thomas has fallen asleep on his Latin dictionary again. Brother Benedict keeps sneaking raisins from a ration jar labeled "for winter starvation." You, however, work with an enthusiasm rivaled only by mud drying, because that's monastic discipline, a special kind of productivity born of vows and absence of alternatives. Around midday, you're summoned to the refectory. Lunch, if one can call it that, consists of watery soup, subtly enhanced by the flavor of disappointment. Conversation is forbidden, except for one monk reading aloud from scripture. He drones, emotionless, like a medieval audiobook that doesn't support. Fast forward. You sip your soup and silently negotiate with heaven. If holiness comes with fewer beet chunks, you'll double your prayers. After the meal, silence continues, but so does gossip, through glances, gestures, and telepathic eye-rolling. Brother Gerard accidentally spills wine on his robe and announces it's a sign from God. You consider that maybe God has a sense of humor. Later, while sweeping the cloister, you peer toward the outside wall, the one separating you from the secular village. Beyond it lie taverns, laughter, and at least 3 sins you still miss. For a moment, you imagine vaulting the wall, sprinting past startled chickens, and living a life of scandalous mediocrity. But then rain starts again, heavy and gleefully symbolic, and you sigh. The wall wins another day. Evening prayers arrive. The chant mixes with thunder and the smell of wet stone. Brother Reginald kneels, eyes closed, mind wandering. He thinks of the world, of traders who sail under bright stars, of women who laugh in taverns, of free people who never memorize which psalm belongs to Tuesday. He feels the pull between heaven and outside, the eternal tug of war between faith and curiosity. When the candles are extinguished, darkness fills the chapel like velvet ink. Reginald stays behind. He sits cross-legged on the cold floor, whispering, not prayers exactly, but questions. Why did God make longing if obedience was the goal? Why give humans brains capable of questioning rules carved in stone? Why make chanting in D minor sound so depressingly cool? The rain slows. A single candle still flickers near the altar. Reginald reaches out and shields the tiny flame with his palm. For a moment, he imagines this fragile light is belief, warm enough to chase away even the draft of doubt. Then he smiles faintly, weary but alive inside his thoughts. He will rise before dawn, chant again, copy scripture, and worry about salvation later. But tonight, within his stone cell, smelling faintly of wax and rainy wool, Brother Reginald feels something close to peace. Or maybe just the relief of accepting confusion as a valid form of prayer. Outside, the wind sighs through the cloister arches like an old friend who doesn't expect answers. Chapter 3. Storm over the Channel. You find yourself at sea, which, given the era, is the 14th century equivalent of volunteering for a stress test. The sky is a quarrel of bruised clouds and nervous lightning. The sea a writhing argument determined to drown everyone equally. You cling to the ship's rail, damp wood slick beneath your palms, while cold rain slaps your face with the enthusiasm of an unpaid intern. Welcome aboard the Lady's Revenge, a name that sounds promising until you realize she's currently trying to murder you. Your captain stands at the helm, boots wide, coat flying dramatically as the storm bludgeons everything that dares to be vertical. Captain, Black Eleanor, legend of the English Channel, looks like she hasn't slept since the plague, which is impressive because the plague probably tried and failed. She barks orders through the roar of wind. Haul the foresail! Brace the main! You briefly debate pretending to understand nautical terminology before deciding that repeating words loudly seems to be the correct management style here. The crew moves in a chaotic ballet, barefoot men scampering up masts, ropes whipping, curses launched with impressive theological creativity. You're the new recruit, meaning your job description is avoid dying and be ballast if necessary. The deck pitches violently. Barrels escape and roll across the planks like caffeinated toddlers. The salt wind tears at your eyes. You can't tell whether you're exhilarated or just seasick enough to transcend consciousness. Below deck, everything smells of old rum, damp rope, and what you strongly suspect is despair seasoned with salted cod. The pirates live down here, in a sort of organized anarchy. Hammocks sway, dice tumble. Someone's pet parrot shouts in Latin curses taught by a monk they once kidnapped. You duck to avoid a swinging lantern and try to pretend your stomach isn't staging an armed revolt. Rum rations are passed around because, historically speaking, hydration through alcohol seemed a viable strategy. You take a sip and feel the liquid scrape your throat like enthusiastic sandpaper. The warmth burns briefly before turning into instant forgetfulness. You understand now why pirates never wrote poetry about water. The ship jolts as thunder bellows overhead, rattling the wooden ribs. Captain Eleanor laughs, a hoarse, terrifying sound that cuts through the storm. She thrives in chaos, arms wide, shouting at the heavens as if daring God to blink first. Lightning illuminates her sharp grin for a split second, and you realize piracy has always attracted people allergic to ordinary employment. Somewhere off the port side, another sail appears. A shadowy shape, black and fast, slicing the storm like a ghost knife. The lookout yells down, "French!" The word snaps through the crew like a whip. Swords scrape free. Powder kegs appear from nowhere. It's simultaneously the worst and most exciting moment of your short nautical career. "Stand ready," Eleanor commands. "They'll think the weather favors them." You peek over the rail. The opposing vessel lurches closer, barely visible through the sheets of rain, its mast cracking under lightning's brief white flash. Cannon fire booms, a sound so vast it feels personal. Water sprays, splinters fly. You flinch and wish you'd stayed a monk. Then, as abruptly as it began, the attack pauses. Perhaps the French captain reconsidered living. Perhaps the sea simply got bored of playing referee. Either way, both ships drift apart, small and mortal beneath the enormous sky. You wipe rain from your eyes and catch your reflection in a puddle pooling across the deck, pale, soaked, and grinning. In spite of terror, something wild stirs in your chest. The strange freedom of realizing there's no time for taxes or shame when the sea might swallow you whole. You may die out here, but at least there's air in your lungs and adrenaline large enough to power a cathedral. Eleanor claps you on the shoulder, hard enough to jolt a cough out. First channel storm survived. You didn't even puke on the compass. Promising. Her approval warms you more than the rum ever did. As dawn limps over the horizon, the clouds crack open lazily, revealing strips of calm sky like mist stitches in the storm's tapestry. The sea still heaves, but its anger has dulled to muttering. The crew begins singing a victory song, half tune, half coughs, nothing fit for polite company. The rhythm of it rolls through the deck, a reminder that humans, given enough chaos, always invent a melody to mock it. You lean on the rail again, drenched but functional. Land glimmers faintly ahead, gray, soaked England, pretending to be welcoming. Behind you, Eleanor shouts for breakfast, hardtack biscuits, which is to say food prepared by someone who hates joy. The sails fill with the swollen morning wind, creaking like old joints ready for another adventure. You take a deep breath of salt, rot, and triumph. The channel sprawls vast behind you, sighing under pale light. You've survived your storm baptism, and for a moment, even without dry socks, you understand why people kept doing this, chasing the edge of the world until the horizon gives up and applauds. Chapter 4. The Head on the Mast. Morning arrives like an apology no one believes. The storm has limped away toward France, dragging its thunder behind it. But the sea still snarls around the hull. You climb groggily onto deck, head pounding with leftover adrenaline and rum. The air smells of salt, ash, and other people's mistakes. And that's when you see it, dangling high on the mainmast, swaying lazily in the pale light. A severed head. Human. Terrifyingly well preserved in the cool air, its mouth frozen open as if still mid-complaint. A dozen gulls circle above it, debating ownership rights. You blink, decide you are definitely awake, and mutter the classic phrase for such moments in maritime history. Well, that's unsettling. Captain Black Eleanor stands nearby, hands on hips, staring up at the head with practical detachment. A warning, she says, to anyone thinking of crossing us. She spits to the side for punctuation, or to remind us what happens to those who forget to duck. You nod carefully, uncertain whether the head belongs to last night's French captain, a mutinous crew member, or someone simply unlucky enough to have annoyed Eleanor before caffeine. No one asks questions because pirates, much like office workers, understand that some team announcements require zero follow-up. The deck is strangely quiet except for the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull and the faint creak of ropes. The crew moves slower than usual, their eyes occasionally flicking upward. There's something about a human head that ruins the mood, even for career criminals. A few sailors cross themselves. Someone whistles to break the tension. Another immediately tells him to stop because it's bad luck, which feels redundant. Up close, you notice the detail. The dark tar coating that tries but fails to disguise the cruelty. The eyes are gone, replaced by calm hollows that see everything and nothing. The hair, caught by the breeze, moves in delicate strands. You try not to think about the life it once contained. The taverns it might have laughed in, the lies it told, the dinners it missed. There's an artistry to the placement, high enough for visibility, angled just so the first thing sailors sighting the Lady's Revenge will notice isn't her damaged hull or patched sails, but her message. Respect due. Eleanor says it flatly, then adjusts her coat and turns toward her cabin. discussion over. You stay where you are, watching the horizon tremble through morning haze. The sea is brutally beautiful, endless, uncaring, noisy as an argument that refuses to conclude. You imagine the world where this head once lived, palaces or prisons, or maybe just another ship that sank under bad weather and worse choices. Every skull becomes a story trimmed to its edit. The boat pitches gently. You lean on the rail, feeling the wood thrum like a pulse. The crew starts swabbing the deck, always.
Something to scrub, always salt to reclaim, always guilt to varnish away. Two younger pirates start sweeping near you, whispering gossip about whose head it was. One insists it's from the French captain who insulted Eleanor's navigation skills. The other swears it's an English tax collector who tried to make her pay dock fees. Both stories sound equally petty, and therefore plausible. Overhead, the gulls resume their shrill commentary. One lands boldly on the mast, eyes the gruesome trophy, and begins pecking with bureaucratic precision. You turn away. Even silence deserves privacy. Down below, the cook starts preparing breakfast. Fish stew thickened with biscuits so old they could double as armor. The smell crawls onto deck like an unwanted guest. Hunger wins, and soon the crew gathers with bowls and spoons carved from bone. They slurp in weary solidarity, eating under their airborne mascot. Nobody mentions the head anymore, but everyone glances up now and then, as if to confirm it's still there, still doing its grim work of memory. When the captain reappears, she brings new orders. "We dock tonight," she announces, "near Dover. Patch the sails, clean up the deck, make her look presentable. The English like their killers tidy." You nod with the others. There's something absurdly bureaucratic about cleaning a ship that still features decapitation decor. But you've stopped questioning pirate priorities. Maybe fear is just brand management with better props. As the day warms and the tide steadies, the head gradually blends with sky and shadow. Against the amber sun, it looks almost noble, an unwilling guardian watching over the restless sea. You wonder if someday yours might swing there too, and whether anyone would still scrub the deck beneath it. The thought is chilling and oddly grounding. Mortality, it seems, is very good at boosting productivity. By afternoon, the English coastline appears through haze, chalk cliffs sharp and pale against the water. The gulls scatter, the crew murmurs, and the ship adjusts course with wooden groans. The head creaks slightly as the wind shifts. It faces land now, silent, accusatory, eternally unimpressed. The captain glances up, smirks, and mutters, "Keep watch, won't you?" Then she turns the wheel toward harbor, leaving you staring at that awful sentinel, swinging gently in the wind, guarding a ship that sails on reputation, rumor, and the faintest echo of conscience. Chapter 5. The Suspicious Lady of County Down. Evening seeps into the manor like spilt ink, thick and slow. Outside, the wind drags across the Irish hills, carrying rain that can't decide whether it's mist or full emotional collapse. Inside, the candles weep uneven pools of wax along the walls, and the air smells faintly of cloves, privilege, and accusation. Lady Maureen O'Shea stands alone before the fireplace, her silhouette flickering against carved oak panels and ancestral portraits that all share the same skeptical eyebrows. Her gown is heavy velvet, dyed a shade of night one shade away from scandal. In her hand rests a vial no larger than a thumb, cut crystal stopper, faint green gleam within, and an aura that suggests its origin story probably involves a swamp and poor decision-making. She tilts the vial toward the firelight, watching it shimmer like envy at a wedding. Somewhere behind her, the floorboards creak. The manor is old enough to have opinions. Maureen doesn't startle, she merely sighs, the long, dramatic exhalation of a woman accustomed to ghosts that refuse to respect boundaries. A servant enters cautiously, balancing a platter of stew and fear. "Your supper, my lady," he murmurs, eyes darting to the vial. She gestures languidly for him to leave it on the table.
He sets it down and performs the polite retreat of someone hoping not to be cursed before dessert. The door closes. The room exhales again. The stew smells edible but untrustworthy. She doesn't touch it. Instead, she pours herself a cup of wine, black as her sense of humor, and sips. The liquid burns pleasantly, the one friend that never interrupts. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, followed by silence, followed by 3 dogs barking in committee. The countryside is restless tonight, rumor spreading faster than candlelight. And the rumor is her, Lady Maureen, accused in hushed tones of witchcraft and foreign sympathies, and worst of all, unusual confidence. In County Down, these are all essentially the same crime. She sets the vial upon the mantel. The liquid inside hums faintly, like a wasp trapped in glass. It's supposed to be medicine. At least that's what the traveling apothecary had claimed. A tonic for sleeplessness, melancholy, and unwanted husbands. He'd winked after the last item, and she hadn't asked for a refund. You, standing at a polite narrative distance, watch her pace the room. Every few steps, her reflection glances back from polished surfaces, restless, intelligent, and royally irritated. There are women built for embroidery, and then there are women built for intrigue. Maureen learned long ago she's allergic to stillness. Thunder shudders over the hills. She moves to the window, parts the heavy curtains, and peers out into the damp dark. Below, her servants scurry to secure shutters. The stable boy curses as a horse decides to perform an interpretive dance about fear. For a moment, she presses a palm to the glass, fogging it slightly, and thinks about escape. London, maybe. Or England's newly fashionable reputation as a place willing to host misunderstood ladies with suspicious vials. Behind her, the fire pops loudly, spitting a spark toward a letter lying on the desk. She turns, plucks it up before the ember catches. The parchment bears the crest of the local magistrate. Another summons for questioning on matters of sorcery, sedition, and unseemly reading habits. She laughs, softly, without amusement, and drops the letter back into the flames. The parchment curls, blackens, and folds in on itself like it's apologizing. Her thoughts drift to the apothecary's words. Just a sip, and all troubles quiet down. She isn't sure whether he meant permanently or just pleasantly. Either way, it's tempting. She unstoppers the vial, and the scent wafts out. Sharp herbs, bitter almonds, hope mixed with hazard. It's the smell of someone about to make history, or a cautionary tale. But then the manor clock tolls, 9 deep, hollow notes, and she pauses. Courage, she decides, should taste like decision, not desperation. She reseals the vial and places it inside a carved wooden box lined with old letters and older disappointments. Tomorrow, perhaps, or the next day. Poison is patient. The living are the ones always in a rush. A new knock rattles the door. The servant again, voice tremoring. "A rider, my lady. Message from the coast. Ships have been sighted from England." She turns, eyes narrowing, the vaguest smile ghosting across her mouth. "Then it's true," she murmurs. "Even the witches are fleeing there now." Outside, the wind pushes harder against the shutters. Lightning flickers briefly, catching her face in gold and shadow. A portrait of wealth and daring. The storm might be closing in, but Lady Marian O'Shea has weathered worse. Husbands, gossip, and faith that always demanded apologies from women who refused to kneel. She drains her wine, draws the curtains, and lets the night keep its secrets. The manor sighs one last creak of judgment, but she doesn't mind. After all, there are more dangerous sounds coming. Hoofbeats, accusations, and perhaps opportunity on the next tide. Chapter 6. Trial by Bonfire. By the time you reach the town square, the smell hits first. Burning wood, sweaty fear, and someone's poorly extinguished righteousness. The crowd hums like an angry hive wearing wool. Peasants, merchants, children balanced on barrels for a better view. It's market day, technically, though the main product on offer seems to be indignation. The square itself looks festive in a macabre way. Someone has hung bunting. There's a vendor selling holy biscuits shaped suspiciously like pitchforks. A friar wanders through the throng, ringing a bell to remind everyone this is about morality, not entertainment, though he's walking in circles accepting coins. At the center, a wooden scaffold, freshly built and uncomfortably symmetrical. The stake rises from its center, tightly wrapped with bundles of kindling and ambition. Bound to it is a woman, hair unkempt, face streaked with soot and stubbornness. Her dress, once blue, now smudged to a dull despair. Two guards stand nearby, exchanging the look of men who hoped for an easier day's work. You press forward through the crowd until you can see her clearly. The accused, Isolde, they whisper, midwife, healer, suspiciously competent with herbs, and far too uninterested in confessing to anything. Apparently, her crimes include curing a cow, reading Latin, and existing while female on a Tuesday. The local priest mounts the platform carrying a small book, a large cross, and the self-assurance of someone who thinks humidity improves sermons. He proclaims the verdict already known to everyone: witchcraft. The word snaps in the air, and the people murmur with satisfaction, as if they've all just correctly guessed the twist ending. Someone throws a handful of herbs at the woman's feet. "For protection!" a little girl cries. Her mother yanks her arm, horrified. The irony is lost in the general shuffling of bonnets and muttered prayers. A man with a torch steps forward. He's the official executioner, though that's less glamorous than it sounds. His robe once belonged to a discontented monk and has visible wine stains. He clears his throat, waiting for the priest's nod. Protocol must always be followed when demonstrating moral superiority. You watch the woman raise her chin slightly, meeting the crowd's gaze. There's no magic here, only defiance wrapped in exhaustion. The fire takes hold of the kindling with a hiss, then a crackle. Smoke spirals upward like a question no one wants to answer. Children cheer. Adults cross themselves. The priest mutters something about eternal souls while discreetly stepping back. The light surges orange across faces, turning them monstrous for a moment, half awe, half relief that it isn't them. Because in truth, that's what drives this ritual, gratitude through terror. You edge closer to the platform, the heat brushing your cheeks, the air tasting of sap and sin. The woman, coughing now, still manages to shout something, but the words dissolve in the roar. It might be a curse. It might simply be truth spoken too loud to survive here. As the smoke thickens, an uneasy silence replaces applause. The cheer fades under the weight of its own echo. People start drifting away, back to their stalls, their gossip, their manageable sins. Justice, apparently, runs on a strict schedule. One boy lingers, clutching a wooden toy horse, watching until the last flame bows out. His mother calls, but he doesn't move until she tugs his sleeve. He will remember this, though not in the way anyone imagined, less about sin, more about how people can vanish while everyone claims virtue. You stand alone when the guards begin stamping out the embers. The ashes rise in little gusts, spiraling skyward like gray petals. Someone mutters that rain's due tomorrow. Someone else worries about next season's harvest. Life continues, as it always does, seamlessly folding barbarity into routine. Later, as night reclaims the square, the scaffold remains, a blackened skeleton silhouetted against the moon. The crowd's footprints crisscross the mud, a lattice of guilt. The priest has gone home to supper, and the guards share a jug of ale behind the chapel, laughing too loudly to sound certain. You find yourself staring at the ashes and wondering if the condemned woman's ghost lingers close, unimpressed. The air still holds a warmth not entirely from fire, something unsettling, persistent, like the residue of truth refused. A gust of wind picks up,
scattering gray flecks over your cloak. They cling stubbornly, shimmering in the lantern glow. You brush them away, but they stick. Tiny reminders that righteousness always leaves a mess someone else must clean up. As you turn to leave, thunder grumbles far off over the hills, low and deliberate, as if heaven itself just cleared its throat in disapproval. The townsfolk will call it weather. You, however, suspect it sounds exactly like the beginning of a reckoning.
Chapter 7. Joan and the Shadow in the Armor. Morning crawls over the battlefield in shades of pale smoke and quiet disbelief. The last of the mist drifts off the churned mud, revealing the leftovers of glory, broken spears, torn banners, and a surprising number of helmets that won't be claimed before lunch. The air is thick with ash, sweat, and the sour tang of triumph. You stand among the victorious French troops, armor dented, hair matted, dignity missing in action. Around you, knights stagger like overcooked tin cans, muttering psalms or swears, whichever comes first. Somewhere a trumpet wheezes its last breath, sounding less like celebration and more like asthma. At the center of it all, Joan of Arc dismounts her horse. The animal, bewildered but loyal, looks just as tired as everyone else. Joan's armor glints in the dim, grubby daylight, streaked with mud and streakier faith. She removes her helmet, steam rising from her short hair, eyes bright and uncomfortably certain. You've never seen anyone believe that hard without caffeine. The soldiers cheer, some kneel. Someone calls her a saint, someone else calls her crazy, and both statements feel entirely compatible. Joan barely notices. She walks the torn field like someone searching for a misplaced miracle. Her banner, white cloth painted with angels who appear to be mid-deadline panic, flutters behind her, the wind forcing its own hallelujah. Beside her, another figure keeps pace, a knight in immaculate silver armor, visor down. Nobody seems to know much about him, and no one asks, the way soldiers don't question rations as long as the bread isn't screaming. The pair makes a striking silhouette, Joan, radiant and earnest, the knight, quiet as gravity. You follow as they cross the makeshift camp. Fires flicker, warming hands and doubts. Wounded men groan under tents embroidered in resignation. Yet somehow, among the carnage, there's laughter, joy that smells faintly of disbelief. Victory always feels like someone else's accident. Joan stops at a fallen standard planted crookedly in the mire. She straightens it with both hands, wiping her brow. "God's will," she whispers. The knight beside her tilts his helm just slightly, as if amused or skeptical. The gesture is subtle enough that only you, loitering with intent, notice the faint curl of smoke rising through the armor's eye slits. Surely it's steam from battle heat, you tell yourself. Surely. And yet, when the knight turns, the air near his feet darkens, not black precisely, more like shadow, remembering what it used to be. You blink. It's gone. The battlefield makes tricks of light and paranoia. Joan steps onto a wagon so the men can see her. "You fought bravely," she declares, voice carrying through exhaustion. "France stands free another day." Cheers erupt. If history were a film reel, this would be the sweeping orchestral moment, the righteous heroine framed by sunlight and destiny. What no one scripts is the way her hand trembles slightly under the banner's weight, or how her eyes flick toward the silent knight for steadiness. He simply nods. The gesture reads supportive, but there's something possessive beneath it, as though faith itself had leased her soul at unfavorable interest rates. Later, as dusk drips across the field, Joan kneels to pray among the remnants of the dead. You remain close because curiosity triumphs over good sense. The knight lingers behind her, motionless. The shadows around him lengthen faster than the setting sun allows. You swear you hear whispers, low, musical, bargaining. Joan finishes her prayer and rises, radiant again, eyes fierce. She doesn't notice the faint black scorch mark trailing from her knees to his boots. She only smiles, exhausted, triumphant, and says, "Tomorrow, we march." The knight bows, and the motion releases a faint hiss, like sighing coals. Then both stride off toward campfire light, leaving muddy footprints that steam until the damp wind cools them. You stay longer, watching the mist curl across the ground, wondering what exactly saints owe to the heavens, and what heaven sometimes collects in return. Someone behind you mutters a blessing. Someone else spits to ward off bad omens. When you finally turn to go, the night thickens, and for a second you're sure the battlefield exhales. Content, maybe, or frightened, because the shadow walking beside Joan doesn't stretch the same way as anyone else's. Tomorrow, she'll lead them again, shining and unbreakable, and none will question the figure always one step behind her. After all, victory tends to forgive whatever darkness keeps its promises.
Chapter 8. The Alchemist's Desperation. You enter through a narrow door set crookedly into the wall of a crumbling mansion, a doorway that smells like soot and opportunity. The air inside presses against you, thick with heat and ambition. This is no workshop. It's a laboratory, an open rebellion against tidy housekeeping. Every surface sweats gold dust and despair. Bronze alembics hiss and bubble over fires that burn too blue to be natural. Glass vessels glow with liquids in hues not found on any moral spectrum. The scent is an overwhelming melange of smoke, vinegar, melted metal, and unwise confidence. You could bottle it and call it Ode to Genius under pressure. At the furnace stands Lord Geoffrey of Wessex, nobleman, amateur scientist, and full-time lunatic. His robe was once velvet. Now it looks like swamp camouflage. He has the eyes of a man who hasn't blinked since the last eclipse, and both hands are stained various shades of oops. You watch as he adds to the furnace something small and shiny, possibly a ring, possibly a family heirloom, or possibly part of the family. "Ah," he says without looking up. "The final catalyst." You hesitate. Historically, final catalyst means run. The flames jump, licking at the low ceiling. A pungent vapor rolls out, making your eyes water and your hope recede. Geoffrey only grins. He's chasing the legend every alchemist dreams about, transforming base metals into gold. The rest dream of funding. He dreams of validation. "Do you know," he mutters, "they mock me at court. They think I waste my fortune, but soon they'll see. My fortune will make itself." He cackles in the approved medieval mad scientist register. High, breathy, just shy of allergic reaction. Around him shelves groan with scrolls and bones, labeled optimistically lead, tin, mercury, and, disturbingly, Cousin Edmund, Test 3. Chains of delicate spheres dangle from rafters. Some hum faintly. None pass a safety inspection. You edge closer to the workbench. On it rest dozens of experiments in varying stages of regret. Jars of crystalline matter, flasks of what could be liquid moonlight, and a small cage containing a frog that appears to be glowing with a sense of profound unease. Beside the frog, an open notebook overflows with cramped handwriting and burnt edges. The notes read like half poetry, half crisis. "If heat purifies, why do I remain impure?" Behind you, a servant coughs discreetly, the sound of a paycheck dying. He slips in holding more coal, eyes darting between you and his employer. His silence speaks volumes of long employment and short futures. Geoffrey waves him away. "Bring no more interruptions. The metal speaks." And indeed, something does speak. A sound rises from the crucible, not quite words, not quite sanity. A low hum that vibrates your teeth and your sense of moral safety. Geoffrey leans in, hair rustling in the heat, and whispers reverently, "It's working." He grabs tongs, lifts a crucible glowing like a piece of bottled eclipse, and pours its contents onto an iron plate. The molten metal spreads in a thin river, cooling into a mirror-smooth surface. Gold, shimmering, gleaming gold. Or at least something trying very hard to be impressive. For one glorious moment, Jeffrey straightens, triumphant. He laughs, almost childlike. Do you see it? Perfection. Then quietly, the gold begins to bubble. It darkens, hardens, and cracks apart. Within seconds, the surface turns dull gray again, sighing as if exhausted from pretending. The nobleman's grin collapses right alongside it. He stares into the ruined sheet. The silence is loud enough to be sacred. Then softly, he says, "So close." He slams a fist onto the bench, sending flasks shattering, and fumes of failure rise like misplaced incense. For a long while, he just stands there, shoulders slumped, surrounded by the ghosts of chemical optimism. You can almost feel the grief hovering above him, heavy as mercury, bright as madness. Finally, Jeffrey wipes sweat from his brow, composing his face back into aristocratic calm. Science is patient, he tells himself. God hides answers where only the brave will burn to find them. His voice trembles on burn. He returns to his furnace. Another coin goes in, then a fragment of something glassy, then a drop of his own blood for luck. One more try, he says. Always one more try. You slip outside before the next explosion of enlightenment or chemicals erupts. The door thuds shut, and from within comes the familiar roar of determination exploding again. In the yard, the night air tastes mercifully ordinary. Smoke curls from the chimney, tinted faint gold for a heartbeat before fading to ash. Somewhere inside, Lord Geoffrey of Wessex whispers to his fire, like a lover and an adversary at once. And if obsession had a sound, it would be this constant, rhythmic flicker. Hope, failure, hope again. Burning as long as ambition has fuel. Chapter 9. The Marsh of Defiance. The sun is a dying ember on the horizon, gold leaking into red, red into smoke. You're standing ankle-deep in the kind of mud that clings like emotional baggage. The air smells of peat, blood, and something far older. Patience, maybe. Or revenge that took the scenic route. Before you stretches a vast bog, glistening with malicious serenity. In the middle of it, knights, actual Norman knights, are attempting to cross in full armor, which is rather like trying to swim in an iron coffin while pretending you're winning. Their standards flap uselessly as the marsh slowly reclaims both horse and pride. On higher ground, partly hidden by reeds, you and history's quiet favorite underdog, a Saxon rebel named Wulfric, watch in silence. Wulfric's beard is impressive enough to qualify as a tactical advantage. His clothes are soaked, his eyes bright under smudges of peat war paint. He grins the grim grin of a man finally getting a refund from fate. They said the Normans could tame anything, he mutters. Perhaps not the mud. Below, one horse bellows, legs thrashing as it sinks deeper. The knight clinging to its back shouts curses that could curdle butter. His comrades shout back something about honor. The marsh replies with the slow burp of bubbles, a sound oddly final. You glance at Wulfric. This feels extreme. He shrugs. They burned our fields. I'm letting the earth get creative about it. He has a point. The real weapons here aren't swords, but time, terrain, and the sheer audacity of nature's physics. Norman steel was made for battlefields, not bogs that whisper, perhaps not today. The light fades to bruise purple. The sky hangs heavy with evening mist, and torches bob like fireflies of denial. One knight manages to scramble onto a hummock of grass, waving his sword defiantly, just as the ground under him collapses. He vanishes with a splash and a cry that ends somewhere underfoot. Tell me you didn't plan that, you say.
Wulfric raises an eyebrow. I wish I could claim credit. The bog has its own diplomacy. He crouches, dips a hand into the mud, and lets it run through his fingers. Old ground remembers. Around his feet are crude traps, stakes, stones, ropes, all set with a patient hand. Saxon rebellion requires the same calm as good bread-making, except instead of dough, you need vengeance. The torches flicker lower down as Norman voices grow fainter. There is shouting, pleading with unseen saints, a lot of creative sloshing. Thick mist curls in, eating sky and horizon until only the sinister plop of armor remains. You wonder, briefly, what it felt like to be one of those knights. To march under a banner stitched by someone who'd never see the fighting, believing your cause eternal, only to realize the earth itself has changed allegiance. Driving your horse fondly named Valor straight into geography that hates you. Wulfric stands, stretches, and turns toward you with quiet satisfaction. That'll do. That'll do what? You ask, incredulous. Buy us a season, maybe two. He grins. Time is a better shield than iron. In the silence that follows, frogs resume their evening rehearsals, soft tremors of life where death still steams. Far off, the last cries fade into the sigh of the bog. The water settles, smooth again, as if politely erasing evidence. The only trace of battle is a torn banner stuck halfway down, its crest distorted into abstract art. Wulfric kneels at the edge and plants a small wooden carving in the mud, a token shaped like a wolf's head. It isn't a prayer exactly, more of a reminder. Let them know. He whispers to the water. We remember who we were. You watch him, heart thudding, realizing this isn't just rebellion. It's memory refusing to sink. The marsh bubbles once more, perhaps in agreement, perhaps indigestion. As twilight deepens, the rebel band gathers from the tree line. Half a dozen silhouettes in wet cloaks, faces drawn but eyes bright. They greet Wulfric wordlessly, exchanging looks that say, "We did it." Somewhere, a night heron squawks approval. He gestures toward the horizon, where the faint sparks of fire mark the Norman camp retreating. They'll write songs about Hastings for centuries, he says softly, but not about this. This is ours. You follow him away from the water's edge, boots squelching, marsh gas flickering pale green behind you like will-o'-the-wisps applauding. The bog exhales once more, swallowing the last bubbles of invader steel. By the time full darkness arrives, the battlefield has become a mirror, still, endless, pretending it witnessed nothing. The reeds sway gently in the wind, murmuring to each other of a night when the mighty forgot to respect mud. You look back only once. The sunset's dying glow turns the swamp red, a molten sheet where knights and pride went quietly to rest. And beside you, Wulfric smiles and murmurs, "In the end, the land always wins." Chapter 10. Treasure of the Dead Shore. The tide has gone out, leaving the world half unmade. The beach stretches gray and slick, a spine of black rock and cold salt wind. You pick your way down the cliff path until the sand gives way to stone, and there, half covered by seaweed and shadows, waits the mouth of the cave. It breathes, not figuratively. The wind moans through it like lungs full of ancient gossip. Each exhale reeks of brine, rot, and unclaimed regret. The waves lap lazily nearby, as though they too would rather not know what's inside. You lift your lantern, shielding the flame from the wind. Light spills ahead a few hesitant feet, revealing glistening walls streaked with moisture. The rock glitters faintly, mica and salt and centuries of failed treasure hunters. The air is thick with damp that crawls under your clothes and lays eggs of chill against your skin. The deeper you go, the more the cave changes its tune. The roar of the surf gives way to faint dripping, echoing in deliberate rhythm.
like someone pacing very far away. You tell yourself it's water refusing to mind its manners. A shape looms ahead. A barrel, one of dozens, stacked awkwardly against the wall like a forgotten shipment. Many are cracked open, leaking black liquid that congeals into slick trails across the stone floor. It isn't tar, it's thicker, darker, and smells faintly of spoiled iron. Something metallic, yet disturbingly organic. You kneel beside one and nudge the lid aside. The inside gleams with wet bones, human probably, unless mermaids died of taxes as well. Around the ribs and skulls, small coins glitter, a pirate's idea of recycling. You close the lid quickly. Farther in, the walls narrow, as though the cave itself has lost patience with visitors. A low ceiling forces you to crouch. Your lantern casts strange shapes that slide across the rock. You catch glimpses of carvings, rough and hurried, crosses, strange letters, faces with huge eyes. Desperate graffiti, scratched by people who didn't finish their to-do lists. The ground crunches under your boots. You look down. Shells, you think, until you realize they're teeth. Lots of them, scattered like confetti after a particularly judgmental wedding. The smell turns worse. Wet decay mixed with salt and the invisible sweetness of something that used to be alive. There's a note of smoke in it too, faint and lingering, as if someone once tried to burn the place clean and failed. You're about to retreat when your lantern flame gutters, flaring pale blue before recovering. The air pulses once, a long, low groan that seems to come from the stone itself. It takes you a full minute to convince yourself that caves, like stomachs, make noises after heavy meals. At last, you find the source of the shaking light ahead. An open space, a damp amphitheater hollowed by patient waves. At its center sits a heap of treasure, or rather, what treasure becomes after encountering time and mold. Coins fused together like fungus, half-rotted ropes of pearls, jeweled hilts crusted in salt. Beauty's landfill. You step closer, metal gleaming under the lantern. But it's not just gold here. Mixed in are things less negotiable. Skulls grinning as if sharing an inside joke, bones arranged deliberately in circles, and, most unsettlingly, a row of small, carved idols staring up from a broken chest. Each figure has its mouth wide open, black holes yawning for sound that never comes. Something moves behind you. You freeze, turn slowly. Nothing. Just a trickle of water sliding down the rock, mocking your heartbeat. You breathe out, set down the lantern, and examine one of the idols. It's smooth, polished, oddly warm beneath your fingertips despite the cold. You could swear you feel a pulse. This is the exact moment, you realize, when historians shake their heads in documentaries and mutter, "He touched it." A distant sound answers the sea's rhythm. A soft clatter, as if something large shifts deeper in the dark. You decide this is not the day for academic bravery. You back away, grip the lantern, and hurry toward the exit. Behind you, faint echoes chase. The slow drip, the whisper of shifting bones. Outside, daylight pours through the cave mouth like mercy. The ocean sparkles, indifferent, erasing footprints before you finish making them. When you finally reach the cliff path again, you turn back once. The cave sits silent, pretending innocence, wind humming through its throat in a tone suspiciously like laughter. Later, as the sun bleeds into the horizon, the waves return to claim what's theirs. Somewhere beneath the surf, bones knock gently against barrels, a secret inventory being checked, night after night. You tell yourself you imagined it, but on the wind, faint and almost tender, comes the echo of coins sliding across stone. Some treasures, it seems, collect interest one soul at a time. Chapter 11. The Apprentice of Shadows.
Night in the medieval city is never truly dark. It's just black velvet spangled with bad intentions. You step into the warren of alleys that curve between sagging timber houses, their upper floors slouching inward like conspirators whispering gossip over your head. The air smells of tallow smoke, horse sweat, and soup that decided 3 days ago it wanted a career as a solid. You keep one hand on the pouch tucked under your tunic, and the other near your knife, decorative mostly, the steel equivalent of a polite cough. All around you, people hum with exhaustion. Somewhere, a lute plays a tune that's definitely illegal before sunrise. Ahead, a lantern flickers against brick, illuminating a small figure crouched beside a straw dummy. His fingers move fast, almost invisible, flick, snip, tug. A belt loosens. A purse slides free. A clean cut, faster than gossip in a tavern. "That's how it's done," says a voice from the shadows. Out steps the master thief, a man built entirely out of shadows and smugness. His cloak is black, his hat is pointy, and his face looks like he's been successfully lying since birth. He inspects his apprentice's handiwork. "Not bad, Finn. The trick is making it sing, not scream." You realize you've stumbled into a midnight lesson. Introduction to Crime for Career-Minded Youths. The boy, Finn, looks about 14 and stress-aged by 4 wars. But real purses kick back. "Exactly," says the thief, grinning. "That's when the fun starts." He glances your way, eyes glinting like coins. "Well, don't just stand there pretending to be scenery." You freeze, caught between fight and polite apology. He laughs. "Relax. We're educating the next generation. You'd be surprised how many noblemen come looking to hire a discreet hand." Finn snorts. "Or deliver one for stealing from them." "Semantics," the thief replies. The boy readies his knife again, practicing on the dummy's rope-tied waist. The master circles him, murmuring advice. "Move with the crowd. Let the rhythm carry you. The city is an instrument. Every cobblestone, a beat. Your blade? That's the melody." He demonstrates, draws the knife, barely moving his wrist, and click. The dummy's pouch falls clean away, dangling like a conquered secret. "See?" he says softly. "No one hears truth or theft unless you give it volume." They practice, over and over. The repetition forms its own music. Scrape, click, whisper, shuffle. The dummy's felt head nods gently in approval, mostly because gravity insists. Lantern light paints their faces with nervous determination. The apprentice's freckles sharp as punctuation marks. The master's grin carved in experience and caffeine. You watch, strangely hypnotized. Maybe it's the rhythm, or maybe the craft. This strange morality built on precision rather than permission. The thief notices your fascination. "Curious, stranger?" he asks. "We're a brotherhood of sorts. Take what's useless to others, leave them their illusions. Fair trade. Does it ever weigh on you?" you ask before thinking. "The stealing." He smirks. "Only when the coin purse is full." Then, more quietly, "Every soul here's stealing something. Time, safety, love, bread. We just happen to make an art of it." The wind shifts, carrying the sour scent of nearby tanneries and the metallic promise of rain. It rattles the loose shingles overhead, turning the alley into a pipe organ of ominous whistles. The master thief glances up. Lessons done. Storms coming, and constables travel in herds when they smell thunder. Finn wipes his knife on his sleeve and looks at the dummy as if expecting it to clap. "Can I try one more?" The master sighs theatrically and waves a hand. "Fine, but make it perfect, lad. You never know when perfection will be your last friend." Finn sets his jaw, moves in a blur, and snip, the pouch falls free. The master catches it in midair and grins. "Look at that, almost invisible. Remember that, Finn. The best thief isn't unseen, he's just unnoticed. Thunder growls above, the sound of divine disapproval or excellent timing. They grab their gear. Before they melt into the warren of side streets, the thief tosses you a coin. It spins, gleaming once before landing in your palm. Old silver, foreign stamping, defaced face of a long-dead king. A souvenir, he winks, for keeping our secret. Then they vanish. Not dramatically, in the way city smoke does, blending into everything else people pretend not to see. You look down the alley, only the straw dummy remains, pockets neatly emptied, expression unchanged. Rain begins, fine as drizzle over moral ambiguity. You slip the coin into your pocket and walk away, realizing the oldest city lesson. Sometimes survival depends less on honesty than on rhythm, and a knife sharp enough to cut through either.
Chapter 12. The Gold General. The sun over Italy burns like an unpaid landlord, relentless and personal. You follow the smell of horses, sweat, and ambition through a labyrinth of canvas tents into the heart of the mercenary camp. Somewhere between laughter and sword sharpening, someone's playing a recorder with violent optimism. This is not an army interested in subtlety. At the center sits their commander, Sir Paolo di Montferrat, known to everyone, including himself, as the Gold General. He lounges in a chair carved from battlefield souvenirs, boots propped on a chest that may or may not contain the previous owner. His armor is polished so bright it reflects the sins of everyone nearby. Around him, chaos thrives. Men argue over payment, dice games, and ownership of one suspicious goat. Smoke rises from a cooking fire where someone claims to be making stew, but the smell suggests a deep mistrust of ingredients. Coins clink in every pocket, loud enough to drown out prayer. The general raises a jeweled goblet, catching the sunlight. "To fortune!" he declares, and half the camp roars in reply. The other half watches the wine splash and calculates how much of it could be resold tomorrow. You step closer. Paolo's face is carved from that peculiar mix of charm and exhaustion reserved for professional manipulators. His eyes are sharp, tiny golden flecks catching light like coins longing for motion. "You're new," he says, voice smooth as aged lies. "An observer?" "Something like that," you answer carefully. "Good," he replies, motioning to a stool. "Always need witnesses for genius. Keeps it from becoming myth too soon." He gestures broadly to the camp. "Behold my artists of chaos, men who can win a battle before breakfast and lose their wages by supper." He says it lovingly, like a parent describing gifted but feral children. A courier approaches, dust coating his armor. He bows and extends a letter. Paolo breaks the seal with relish. "Another duke requesting our humble service," he murmurs, scanning the page. "Promises double our rate, eternal glory, and enough territory to house our egos." He tosses the parchment aside. "Eternal glory doesn't buy decent boots." The men laugh. Coins change hands, bets made, debts forgotten, then remembered, because time in a mercenary camp flows on rhythm, not order. The sound of hammers striking armor merges with shouting, some military, some marital, all loud. Paolo waves at his quartermaster. "Bring the payroll." Moments later, a wooden box thuds onto the table, spilling gold florins that catch the light like tiny, blinding miracles. The soldiers hush involuntarily. Gold is to mercenaries what religion is to everyone else. Hope wrapped in ritual. The general counts aloud, not because he needs to, but because it makes the silence kneel. You study him, the way his fingers linger over each coin, how his smile never reaches his eyes. This isn't greed, it's devotion. Gold isn't money here, it's proof that he exists. Each coin another yes from a god who answers only to arithmetic. A messenger, out of breath, bursts in. The Count of Parma has betrayed his treaty. He's allied with Milan. The camp murmurs,
Paolo stills. Did he? His tone is light, dangerous, curious the way cats are curious about mortality. He stands, stretching, and addresses the men. My friends, looks like faith in nobility has once again been misplaced. Excellent. That means work. Cheers. Faltering, greedy cheers, but cheers nonetheless. Paolo turns back to you, eyes gleaming. You see why I prefer gold to trust? Trust melts faster. He nudges the chest under his feet. And gold doesn't need forgiveness. Later, at dusk, the camp glows with torchlight. The flicker warps faces into saints and sinners interchangeably. The general dines surrounded by officers, trading jokes, stories, and strategies like contraband. You overhear him say, "We sell victory, but at least we have the honesty to invoice." As the last of the wine flows, he leans back, watching embers drift into the dark. Tomorrow we march to Parma, he says. Tonight we sleep with full pockets and empty consciences. The firelight dances over his armor, bathing him in molten gold so bright it hurts to look too long. For a moment he seems carved from coinage itself, shiny, weighty, and utterly hollow inside. Around the camp, dice clatter again. Laughter returns. Someone finds a lute slightly more in tune with hell. And you realize this is how history records itself, not as victory or defeat, but as noise echoing off gold until both sound the same. Chapter 13. Pilgrims of Questionable Piety. It's morning on the long road to Compostela, the kind that makes you question every life choice beginning with, let's walk. The dust here has personality, thick, clingy, and much smarter than the people moving through it. Pilgrims trudge past you in a slow parade of faith and foot blisters, some humming hymns, others muttering rent complaints directly to heaven. From a distance, it looks holy. Up close, it sounds like chafing. Scallop shells dangle from cloaks and hats, clacking together like applause for everyone's bad decisions. The sun is merciless, but enthusiasm is the first casualty of pilgrimage. You can smell penance baking. Ahead, an especially cheerful group waves at you to join. 3 men draped in pilgrim robes, broad smiles, walking with suspicious confidence. Their leader, a wiry man with eyes like someone who's already memorized where your wallet is, greets you warmly. Brother traveler, seeking salvation or just good scenery? A bit of both, you admit. He grins. Aren't we all? He offers bread that's miraculously fresh for men who claim to have walked 6 days straight. You notice their scallop shells are carved from silver, glinting as they move. Either divine favor or unusually good metallurgy. As you walk beside them, conversation turns lively. They trade jokes about monks who snore through prayer and abbots who sell indulgences like raffle tickets. The road hums with laughter and dust motes. You almost feel comfortable. Then one of them, a broad-shouldered fellow carrying an improbably heavy staff, drops his voice low. See that merchant up ahead? He nods toward a portly man guiding a mule laden with goods. Word is he carries a purse heavier than his morals. The wiry leader chuckles softly. Brothers, perhaps the Lord provides our dinner through practical miracles. You blink. They've gone from pilgrims to predators mid-prayer. The broad-shouldered one gives a hand signal you can only describe as semi-sacred jazz fingers. And suddenly the dynamic changes. As you trudge onwards together, they begin their performance. Whispered code disguised as blessing. When the leader greets the merchant, "Peace be upon your honest trade, good sir." His hand brushes the man's sleeve, signaling the second pilgrim to drop a small stone. The merchant's mule halts, startled. Coins shift with a lovely, damning jingle. The third man steps forward, feigning concern, guiding the frantic merchant's hands while the leader's fingers melt around the purse string. It's over in seconds. They wave goodbye like seasoned saints, pockets discreetly heavier. You walk in silence for a while, trying to decide whether to be impressed or excommunicated. Finally, you say, "That seemed not very, spiritual." The leader laughs easily. "Oh, but it is. Think of it as wealth redistribution with flair.
The rich get humility, and we get lunch. Everyone's closer to God after. Are you not afraid of being caught? You ask. He grins wider. We're pilgrims. Who suspects piety? Our disguises are sealed by holy paperwork and dust. Besides, penitence is portable. He winks. We repent at sunset. You want to disapprove, but there's something bizarrely logical about their self-aware sinning. They steal as casually as others gossip, and justify it with more theology than most universities manage in a semester. As afternoon drifts in and shadows lengthen, the road twists through olive groves heavy with bees. The air hums softly, sweet with pollen and irony. Up ahead, they spot another mark, a noblewoman's caravan, bright banners fluttering. The leader sighs contentedly. The Lord's bounty continues. You decide this might be an excellent time to question your career in casual larceny studies. You slip away under the pretense of collecting wild herbs, turning east down a fork that smells marginally less like sin. Behind you, faint laughter carries on the wind, gleeful, sharp, unrepentant. The sound of scallop shells clacking again, now unmistakably like coins. You walk faster until the noise fades. The sun begins its slow bow toward the horizon, bathing the road in gold that feels like mockery. Somewhere, along another bend, new pilgrims appear, tired, barefoot, earnest, actually praying, and for a moment, you envy them their simpler path. By nightfall, you find an inn called The Honest Wayfarer, a name so optimistic it has to be false advertising. Inside, you pay for stew with the single coin you swear you earned yourself. Outside, the wind rustles the olive trees. Somewhere far down the darkening road, 3 pilgrims laugh around a stolen campfire, toasting, perhaps, to salvation, perhaps to survival. And maybe in this century, they're the same thing. Chapter 14. Vlad's Garden. Morning breaks over Wallachia, and the birds wisely stay silent. The land stretches before you in velvet green, gorgeous in that deceptive way only danger can manage. Mist curls around the forest edges, wrapped in quiet that feels rehearsed. At first you think you're walking into dawn's untouched beauty, until the trees sharpen in shape, and you realize they aren't trees at all. Stakes. Hundreds of them. They rise from the earth in rough, uneven rows, a macabre forest of sharpened trunks. Each holds what was once a person, soldiers, thieves, unlucky travelers, all now arranged into Vlad Dracula's idea of civic communication. The impaled sway slightly in the wind, a grisly orchestra section tuning their instruments. The air smells of damp wood, iron, and something so human that you can't name it without flinching. Vlad stands at the heart of it, motionless, in dark armor that drinks the light. His cloak snaps in the breeze, a silent flag announcing the empire of "Don't mess with me." From a distance, he looks like a statue. Up close, like someone who prays by rearranging moral categories. You stop a few paces behind. He doesn't turn immediately. When he does, his eyes gleam like river stones, cold, patient, quietly unimpressed by any reality softer than his own. "Beautiful," he says, gesturing toward the carnage. "The Turks will see this from the ridge. It makes politics much simpler." You're trying to craft a polite response somewhere between impressive and "please don't add me to the scenery." Finally, you settle on silence. He studies you with mild amusement. Do you find it cruel? The truth stays wisely behind your teeth. He continues anyway. It is efficient. Fear is faster than treaties, and far cheaper than soldiers who require payment instead of nightmares. He walks between the stakes like a gardener proud of his work. Each body is positioned deliberately, heads facing east like failed suns. Some are nearly skeletal, others fresh enough that the flies still gossip. You notice small details, a broken ring on one finger, a child's sandal half buried in the dirt, proof that efficiency always has a human aftertaste.
Vlad pauses by one stake, brushes dried mud from the base almost tenderly. "There's an order to this," he murmurs. "The lazy corrupt the straight line." You realize almost absurdly that he means the stakes, not morality. A soldier approaches, hesitant. "My lord, the envoys from Hungary arrive soon." Vlad's mouth tightens into something that could almost be a smile. "Good. They enjoy theater. Tell the cook to prepare wine and clear a space by the gate. For inspiration." The soldier bows and retreats quickly, tripping over what might be a femur. You swallow hard, trying to avoid breathing too deeply. The wind changes, carrying ash and sweetness. Somewhere, carrion crows debate inheritance.
Rights.
"People call me monster," Vlad says suddenly, eyes still on the horizon. "But what is a monster if not a mirror that refuses to flatter?" He looks at you again, intense enough to straighten your spine involuntarily. "Write that down," he commands softly. "Someone will enjoy reading it. Centuries from now they'll make plays about me, I'm sure. Heroes rot fastest without villains to compare themselves to." He steps closer, boots sinking in the muddy ground. "I do what must be done so my land may breathe without choking on fear of others. Better they fear me instead." You can feel the enormous stillness of the place pressing in. All those watching non-eyes, history breathing hot and slow across your neck. Dusk creeps forward too soon, the mist thickening into twilight. Vlad walks away toward his fortress, the spires visible through the fog like teeth biting the sky. Behind him, the stakes form perfect ranks, his silent army of proof. When he's gone, the silence returns, denser now, as if the earth itself is holding in a sob. You take one last look at the forest of the dead. The grandeur of it is undeniable, the horror precise. It smells of empire in progress. And maybe he's right. Nations are built exactly like this, on sharp points driven by fear, arranged tidily so everyone knows their place. As you turn to leave, a crow lands on a nearby skull, cocking its head. It squawks once, disapprovingly, as if to say, "Humans, always overdoing it." Then it flies into the fading light, wings slicing the silence apart. The garden hums again with wind among the stakes, a bleak, rhythmic rustle that could almost be applause from history itself, if history had the stomach to clap. Chapter 15. Fortress of the Sky. From a distance, it looks like a mirage suspended mid-breath. Alamut, the eagle's nest, fortress of Persia's unreachable dreams, clings to the summit of an impossible mountain. Its stone walls blending so perfectly with the rock that it seems carved by hubris itself. Above it, the air glows bright and thin, a silence so pure that sound feels like vandalism. You begin the climb before dawn. The path coils upward in narrow switchbacks, goat trails masquerading as ambition. Every step dislodges dust that floats away like burned incense. Below you, the valleys stretch forever, scored with rivers that glint like lost silver. Behind you, the world begins to shrink. Villages turn into patterns, people into probabilities. As the sun rises, the fortress reveals its details. Watchtowers jutting out on impossible ledges, stairs chipped directly from the mountain's bones, banners fluttering crimson and black. Each gust of wind carries a faint note of oil, smoke, and discipline. This is the home of the Nizari assassins, guardians of mysteries, rumors, and excellent cliffside architecture. A gate waits near the summit, so narrow it could only welcome certainty. 2 sentries stand motionless beside it, faces veiled, hands resting on curved daggers that gleam with quiet manners. One inclines his head. Purpose? Curiosity, you admit. Dangerous currency. He replies without judgment, and gestures you inside. Alamut breathes with activity. Scholars bent over manuscripts in shaded courtyards, warriors practicing silent strikes, young novices carrying trays of tea with the sincerity of explosives. The walls themselves seem alive, humming faintly with the vibration of secrecy. The air smells of limestone, ink, and controlled paranoia. Your guide, an older man with a beard wide enough to host seminars, leads you up a narrow stair carved into sheer stone. Each step, he says in a low voice, was placed to remind us that effort itself is devotion. You're certain your calves agree with the theological point. At the top, you reach the main terrace, a breathtaking platform stretching into the clouds. From here, the view swallows everything. The Caspian to the north, endless ochre ridges to the south, and the deep green of hidden orchards below. It is as though the earth forgot to stop rising. The guide gestures toward a figure standing at the parapet. A tall man in white robes, sleeves edged with black. Hassan Nisaba, founder of this isolated empire of belief and discipline. He doesn't turn when he speaks. His voice carries easily in the high air. Every fortress, he says, is built first in the mind. The walls only follow. You approach carefully. And its purpose, Master? To keep truth safe from those who prefer comfort. He finally turns, eyes sharp as winter stars. You notice the faint tremor of weariness around them. The toll of maintaining a faith that requires both fury and logic. Hassan gestures toward the valley below, where the world glitters small and fragile. Down there, kings trade lives for years. Up here, we trade years for meaning. He smiles thinly. A less profitable exchange, but cleaner accounting. Around you, students sit cross-legged on the stone floor, copying cryptic texts filled with diagrams of stars and blades. They whisper verses in Arabic and Persian, languages interlacing like silk threads. A young initiate balances on the wall's edge, reciting philosophical paradoxes with the serenity of someone who either transcended fear or misread the schedule. The breeze shifts, cool, dry, intimate. An eagle cries overhead, a sound too pure for comfort. You realize why the fortress feels alive. It's not hatred that sustains it, but precision. A perfection earned tablespoon by exhausting tablespoon. To live here means being measured constantly against gravity itself. Your guide returns with tea poured into small cups of carved soapstone. The liquid tastes of smoke and mint, sharp enough to realign regrets. To stand here, he murmurs, is to remember that knowledge is both weapon and wound. Below, the valley darkens as clouds drift across the sun, shadows moving like giant hands over the land. From this height, wars look tidy, and ambition tragically small. Before you leave, Hassan speaks again, almost to himself. They will call us myth, he says, but myth is only history with better editing. As you descend the path, the wind rises, carrying with it the faint clang of steel and chanting. A single phrase repeated until it sounds like the heartbeat of stone. The fortress fades behind you, shrinking first to a dot, then to a rumor, then to faith. And somewhere at that unreachable peak, Alamut stands unmoved, a mountain dreaming of men who dared to believe that knowledge could make them higher than fear itself. Chapter 16. The Purse and the Blade. Market days are supposed to smell festive, but this one reeks of humanity under pressure. Fish, sweat, smoke, and ambition all simmered together beneath a sun that clearly dislikes everyone equally. You wade through the crowd as it surges and sighs around you, a living tide of cloaks, baskets, and the occasional goat unsure of its purpose. Vendors shout from every direction, voices competing like jealous trumpets. "Apples, sweet as sin," calls one. "Eels, fresh from the river this morning," proclaims another, although the scent insists those eels broke curfew days ago. A woman sells ribbons dyed in questionable ingredients. Two monks debate theology with language that could blister parchment. And somewhere, inevitably, a bard is murdering a love song for tips. In the middle of this joyful noise, you spot an old man leaning casually against a wooden post. He's dressed as poorly as the rest, but
but moves with a kind of relaxed calculation that instantly betrays him to anyone paying attention, which, conveniently, no one is. He's the master pickpocket of this slice of the city, a man whose reputation reads like poetry recited under low candlelight. Elegant, practiced, and slightly immoral. Next to him, his apprentice, a wiry girl of maybe 16, stares at the roaring river of people with that intense, hungry focus reserved for cats and new thieves. In her hand gleams a slim blade, not long enough for combat but perfect for snipping. Quietly, efficiently. "Remember," murmurs the master, voice graveled by cheap wine and wisdom. "Don't look at the purse. Look at the space around it. Greed stares. Finesse glances." The girl nods, slipping into the moving crowd like a sigh. Her eyes catch on a merchant weighed down with coin. The man wears rings heavy enough to throw off his balance and laughs with the reckless joy of someone thoroughly self-congratulatory. Perfect target. You follow at a safe distance, pretending to ponder pottery. The girl's footsteps match the rhythm of the market. 2 forward, 1 pause, a fake stumble, an apologetic smile. Her hand moves, swift, practiced, and the blade whispers through leather. The sound is so delicate it could be mistaken for wind brushing fabric. The purse slides into her palm, small and certain. No one notices. Not even the laughter falters. She melts back toward the old man, heartbeat visible in the twitch of her jaw. He catches her eye, smiles faintly, and they drift together to a corner between 2 stalls piled with bolts of wool. "Clean," he says, weighing the purse gently. "You'll live to make rent." She exhales with a soft, incredulous laugh. "It's so easy," she says. The old thief snorts. That's what everyone thinks the first time they get away with it. Then comes the day the wind shifts and it isn't easy anymore. He tips the purse upside down. A dozen coins clink into his palm, winking greedily in the sunlight. He flicks one toward her. "Never take more than you can run with." They move off, their work unfinished. She practices again and again, each cut a precise motion, like a punctuation mark in the novel of the crowd. The old man watches, occasionally adjusting her stance or muttering aphorisms. "Patience steals more than speed," and "Respect the seamstress, you borrow her stitches." Around them, the market keeps its chaotic rhythm. A hawker drops a tray of apples. A beggar mutters prophecy between sneezes. Somewhere, a dog discovers theology through leftover sausage. Nobody notices the quiet duet of teacher and student turning other people's money into art. By noon, the girl's pocket bulges with coins, and her confidence sparkles too brightly. The master senses it, the arrogance that makes even saints mortal. He signals the end of the lesson. But as they weave toward the exit gate, she stops short, eyes fixating on one final pouch, ornate and tempting, hanging from the belt of a man in fine velvet. She moves before he can speak. One swift slice, too sharp, too confident, and the blade catches sunlight. The nobleman turns, hand snapping down, fingers clamp around her wrist. The market pauses, the collective inhalation of 1,000 curious lungs. The old thief steps forward slowly, clapping once. "Ah, my niece, so clumsy. Practicing her sewing, you see?" His laugh is scraping honey, the noble's confusion tangible. A few exchanged words, a small coin discreetly palmed, and tension dissolves back into noise. Only when they leave the market's din does he finally scold her. "Skill without patience is just noise, and noise gets you caught." She nods, chastened but unbroken. He studies her face and can't help smiling. "Still," he says, "nice cut." They fade into the alley's dusk, footsteps silent as closing wallets. Behind them, the market roars on, unaware that half its economy now jingles in someone else's pockets. In the distance, a bell tolls the hour, the perfect soundtrack to commerce, moral and otherwise. You realize there's a strange kind of poetry here. Hundreds of people trading goods and lies, all believing in the fairness of an unfair world. And in that slim space between honesty and hunger, a blade flashes once more, swift and unseen. A single, elegant sentence written in silver. Chapter 17, The Golden Toast of Babylon. The palace of Babylon hums like a beehive made of stone and hangovers. You are inside its marble hall, the air sticky with incense, sweat, and politics. Every surface shimmers with gold, walls inlaid with leafed reliefs of gods who would definitely hate this party. Bronze braziers burn perfumed oil, spicy enough to make your eyes water and your conscience faint. At the far end of a banquet table long enough to qualify as an architectural feature sits Alexander the Great. Except tonight, he's looking more moderately unwell than immortal conqueror. His face glistens under torchlight, pale as diluted wine. The great king's hand trembles slightly as he lifts his goblet, a golden cup so large it might double as a bird bath. Around him, generals recline on cushions, laughing too loudly and drinking like history's footnotes trying to stay relevant. The hall roars with conversation, snatches of Greek, Persian, Macedonian, and outright slurred. Platters of roasted lamb and spiced fruits spill across the table like confessions. Servants move silently among the chaos, bearing new jugs and cautious expressions. This is the world's most awkward peace treaty disguised as a dinner party. You stand near the wall, pretending to study a mosaic of winged lions, but really watching Alexander. There's a feverish gleam to him that kings usually reserve for war or bad ideas. He leans toward his friend Hephaestion's empty seat, still unfilled since death claimed its owner months ago. You swear you hear him whisper something under his breath. Not prayer exactly, but grief's sarcastic twin. A general across the table, Ptolemy, raises his cup. "To the empire!" he shouts. The others echo the toast because that's what you do when authority is contagious. The clink of metal reverberates long after their enthusiasm dies down. Alexander raises his own goblet, though his smile looks rehearsed. "To the future," he says, voice rough as sand dragged through honey. "The best conquests are those we have not yet imagined." Then he drinks, deeply, defiantly. The gesture is half challenge, half ritual. The liquid burns amber in the firelight, hauntingly beautiful, disturbingly final. Laughter rises again. One of the generals starts telling a story about elephants, a parrot, and an unfortunate siege. Another one insists the gods personally favored the last campaign. Alexander listens, eyes half-lidded, tracing imaginary continents in the spilled wine before him. The pattern maps themselves in crimson smears, an empire dissolving before dessert. A servant approaches with more of that golden liquor. As the cup is refilled, Alexander coughs, sudden and sharp. The room stills for a heartbeat. Politeness is a dangerous luxury near a man who could execute you for caring too much. Someone makes a joke about Babylonian dust allergies. Laughter slinks back in, nervous and premature. You catch the faint strain of harp music, muted, elegant, trying too hard to drown out mortality. The torches sputter as if whispering gossip. Across the table, Cassander raises yet another toast, boasting loyalty that's clearly audition material for treason. Alexander cuts him off with a dry chuckle. Loyalty is just impatience wearing armor. The line earns laughter, but there's an edge to it sharp enough to shave destiny. He stands slowly, steadying himself with one hand against the table. The gold threads embroidered on his tunic flash like lightning caught in fabric. "Gentlemen, tomorrow we ride again." A pause follows,
awkward and thick. They all know he can barely walk, let alone ride. But no one corrects the king who insists that history is punctual. He downs another gulp from the cup. This time he winces. The room pretends not to notice as the goblet clatters faintly when he sets it down. A tremor runs through his fingers like a whispered prophecy. Outside, thunder growls over the plains. Babylon's sky broods the color of bronze. A gust of hot wind pushes through the open doors, sweeping across the hall and scattering rose petals from silver bowls. For one perfect instant, the banquet freezes mid-gesture. Warriors, drinkers, dreamers, all suspended between applause and aftermath. Alexander's voice breaks the spell, quiet but cutting. "Let no one say," he murmurs, "that gods don't answer when I drink to them." His laughter comes out hoarse, half cough and half defiance. The generals raise their cups again, out of fear, respect, habit. You suspect none of them will remember the words clearly tomorrow. But history will. It always remembers its toasts, especially the poisoned ones. Later, as servants snuff the torches and the hall dissolves into shadows, the golden cup remains on the table, catching the last flicker of firelight, gleaming like a trophy or a warning, or both. And somewhere outside, the storm finally bursts, drumming against Babylon's marble, applauding a man who's managed to conquer everything except the human condition. Chapter 18. The shadows at the door. Babylon has gone quiet. The thunder from last night's storm still grumbles faintly along the horizon. But inside the palace, silence reigns. Heavy, deliberate, and terrified of being noticed. You walk down a long corridor tiled with the color of afterthoughts, past statues of forgotten gods, into the royal bedchamber where the master of the world is dying. The air is thick with incense and panic. Servants glide about on soft sandals, faces blank masks of obedience. The sound of water dripping in a nearby basin is the only conversation anyone trusts. Alexander the Great lies on a high bed draped in silk so fine that it rustles when he breathes, or tries to. That shallow rise and fall, uneven now, is the drumbeat by which his empire unravels. Even in sickness, he is beautiful in that unbearable, doomed way heroes cultivate. His skin gleams with fever sweat, and his once bright eyes stare at the canopy overhead as if the stars he conquered have followed him indoors to mock him. A physician leans close, placing a trembling hand on the king's wrist. He frowns at the faint pulse, then retreats before anyone can translate his expression into treason. The generals cluster in the doorway, pretending to whisper but really calculating. Ptolemy, Perdiccas, Seleucus. The future is already dividing itself between them like dogs eyeing the same bone. Their armor gleams, their loyalty does not. "Maybe it's only the heat," one murmurs. "In Babylon," another scoffs. "He's burning from the inside." A servant brings water cooled with snow carted down from distant mountains, an absurd luxury for a man who once drank from muddy rivers without complaint. Alexander tries to lift his hand for the cup but cannot. The attendant moves to help, but Perdiccas waves him off, stepping forward with rehearsed humility. "Let me, my king." He lifts the cup to Alexander's lips. The liquid trembles. Perhaps the general's hands are not as steady as his ambition. Alexander drinks or pretends to, managing a faint smirk before the effort exhausts him. The doctor whispers to an aide, "If he lasts another day, it will be a victory." The phrase lands wrong, as though survival were just another siege to win by logistics. Outside the chamber, the city holds its breath. Rumors bloom everywhere like fungus. Poisoned wine, curses, divine withdrawal. Priests fill the courtyards, burning leftover optimism by the handful. You edge closer to the great king's bedside. The smell of fever, spice, and damp linen mingles until it's impossible to know which is which. His fingertips twitch against the sheets,
and his gaze unfocused, drifts toward the open doorway where the generals still linger like shadows, debating the etiquette of usurpation. "Come closer," Alexander rasps, every word a coin spent dearly. They obey instantly. Habits forged in conquest die slower than monarchs. "You will rule."
Together, he breathes. "Keep what we built standing." The generals nod and promptly begin rewriting history in their heads. His eyes, clouded but still terrifying, scan their faces. "Don't look so grateful," he whispers. "You'll hate each other by sunrise." The effort drains him. He sinks back, damp hair clinging to his temples. The room is suddenly colder. Or maybe it's just full of absence in advance. A young attendant, maybe no older than the Empire's first battle, kneels to adjust the blanket. His hands shake as he tucks the edge beneath the king's arm. In that small movement, the quiet service, the fearful compassion, you see the Empire distilled into one gesture. Care born of terror, loyalty built from debt. The hours slouch by, measured in the soft scrape of sandals and stifled coughs. Outside, the Euphrates murmurs on, untroubled by human drama. The torches burn lower until their light barely grazes the walls. Finally, when the doctor admits sleep might ease his pain, everyone pretends to leave. But no one really does. They linger at the threshold, half in light, half in allegiance. The night air seeps through the open doors, cool and indifferent, carrying the scent of dust and empire. Alexander drifts between breaths. The general's silhouettes stretch long against the walls, black fingers reaching toward the bed. The shadows seem to move on their own, conspiratorial, expectant. And somewhere in that dim stillness, the greatest conqueror of men faces his last surrender. To the quiet, to history, to the truth that no one commands eternity. In the doorway, the generals watch and wait, already practicing their best expressions of mourning. The torchlight trembles, and so does the throne of the world. Chapter 19, The Final Salute. Dawn returns to Babylon reluctantly, as though afraid to interrupt. The palace lies wrapped in hush, its corridors heavy with exhaustion and incense. Outside, pigeons coo on the hot stone terraces, oblivious that the man who once called himself invincible now struggles with something smaller and merciless, the mathematical ticking of time. Alexander the Great is dying. Everyone knows it. The only mystery left is how death will be handled, gracefully, theatrically, or both. In the dim chamber, his body burns with fever, skin pale as bleached parchment. The air hums with whispered prayers and greed, carefully disguised as grief. At the foot of the bed, soldiers line the doorway, each waiting, uncertain whether this is worship or roll call. They've marched with him for years, from Macedon's dust to the edges of the known world, and now stand as silent witnesses to their own disbanding. Someone opens the curtains slightly. The morning's first light cuts through the haze, glancing off bronze shields and tear-streaked faces. It paints Alexander's profile in gold, as if the sun wants to sign one last alliance. His breathing is ragged, but for a moment he forces his eyes open, searching the faces gathered before him. The generals have arranged the audience. Nothing spontaneous about it. One last performance for the history books. The veterans file in, one by one, the men who once followed his shadow into impossible battles. They move slowly, thick-necked, scarred, world-weary. Each steps forward, kneels, and lowers his head. It's a ritual, half farewell, half review. You watch from the edge as the first soldier approaches. Alexander's lips twitch, almost a smile. He lifts his hand, trembling but deliberate, and extends it toward the man. The soldier bows, presses his forehead to those outstretched fingers, and whispers something you can't hear. Likely a thank you, or maybe an apology. Then he steps aside.
Another veteran comes, then another. The motion repeats, steady as heartbeat. Kneel, bow, rise, exit. Their armor creaks, their breaths echo. Somewhere behind you a general sniffs, theatrically understated. The king's hand shakes with effort but never fails. Recognition, forgiveness, absolution, delivered through the same gesture that once directed armies. The physician attempts to interfere, worried the exertion will hurry the end, but Perdiccas hushes him. "Let him finish," he says quietly. "You can't interrupt a farewell tour." Near the doorway, a younger soldier falters. He doesn't know the proper sequence, being too new, too wide-eyed. So he salutes clumsily, awkward hand to chest. Alexander notices, faint amusement flickering across his face. His raised palm wavers, then steadies, a small sign of approval that somehow feels imperial. It hits you then. This moment is not just goodbye, but transmission. Power leaving warm flesh and gliding soundlessly into the myth machinery already revving up outside. King, God, story. They are all staging a rehearsal for immortality. Halfway through the line, Alexander's arm starts to droop. A servant moves to support it, but he shakes his head. Pride refuses assistance even now. Instead, he shifts slightly so the hand rests against his knee, still lifted enough for those who kneel to feel it as benediction. When the last of them approaches, an old companion limping heavily, Alexander rallies what little remains of him. His eyes flare open, startlingly clear. "My friend," he rasps, voice thin but stubbornly regal. "Tell them." He stops to swallow air. The man bends close. "Tell them we reached the ocean." The soldier nods, tears cutting trenches down his weather-bitten cheeks. He kisses the king's hand, then backs away, shoulders shaking. No one else moves. The silence stretches until it swells like a hymn. Then, quietly, Alexander lets his arm fall. It lands softly upon the silk sheet, his fingers curling once, twice, then still. The soldiers understand before anyone speaks. A low murmur spreads, half sob, half salute. Helmets are removed, knees touch stone. The empire itself seems to inhale sharply, realizing it must now exhale him. Outside, the city begins to stir. The marketplace cries, the clatter of carts, the business of survival resumes, unaware that the man who rearranged continents has finally stopped rearranging anything at all. Inside, the veterans stand in a half circle, heads bowed. They know battles end with someone's hand on the ground. In the stillness, a banner flutters near the window, catching the dawn breeze. It's so faint you might imagine it, but for an instant, you think you hear his voice again, deep, steady, commanding, ordering the world to march on without him. And obedient as ever, the world does. Chapter 20. The Hand Falls. The room has not changed, but everything inside it now behaves differently. The air, heavy with incense, stops pretending to move. The torches dip low, throwing trembling shadows across marble that's suddenly too bright. A single sound interrupts the silence, a soft, almost polite noise, like fabric sighing. Alexander's hand slides off the edge of the bed and falls onto the silk sheet below. It makes no splash, no thud, just a whisper as it lands. That motion, small and final, is enough. The world in the room ends there. For a moment, no one breathes. The gathered generals stare as though the gesture were theatrical and temporary, waiting for their king to straighten, to deliver one last command or joke about how brute mortality never played fair. When nothing follows, the truth crawls across their faces like morning light discovering a battlefield. The physician approaches slowly, his bare feet brushing the floor. He touches Alexander's wrist, already cooling. "It's done," he murmurs. The words fall into the stillness like stones into deep water. Then chaos, but the quiet kind. generals whispering, servants crying in stifled panic, one officer crossing himself in 3 different languages just to be safe. Ptolemy circles the bed, checking for witnesses to his composure. Seleucus clenches his fists like a gambler still convinced his luck can be negotiated. Perdiccas steps closer, eyes wide, already seeing a map in his head. The empire split into territories labeled with his name. You remain near the curtain, half hidden, watching how swiftly reverence collapses into arithmetic. Even grief here has a strategy. The physician removes the crown wreath from Alexander's head. It's wilted, the gold threads sticky with sweat. He lays it across the folded cloak on the table, uncertain whether to treat it as relic or responsibility. A bead of wine, left from last night's toast, quivers on the goblet beside it. Hephaestion's empty seat still stands by the bed, its cushion untouched. Some of the soldiers glance at it, perhaps hoping 2 ghosts are better than one. The generals cluster together, forming the shape of conspiracy. "Who will rule?" one hisses. "He left no heir of age." "Then let the strongest," another begins, then stops when Perdiccas's eyes flash like drawn steel. They all remember how the last man to finish that sentence got promoted to ancestor. A servant, a boy barely 16, kneels beside the fallen hand. He hesitates, unsure whether to lift it back onto the sheet. After a moment, reverence wins over fear. He touches the king's fingers gently. They're already stiffening, but he arranges them carefully, folding them over the chest like a final salute. No one thanks him. They're busy rehearsing history. Outside, thunder grumbles against the walls. Somewhere a bell tolls, though Babylon has no tradition for this kind of death. The wind from the open balcony sweeps the heavy drapes, letting in the smell of rain and dust, the empire's 2 native perfumes. The physician whispers a ritual prayer, voice trembling. "From dust we rise, and to dust we claim dominion." Even that sounds like political commentary now. Ptolemy breaks the silence. "We'll say his last words were about unity," he declares, already editing reality for posterity. "Unity," mutters Seleucus. "In whose favor?" They share the kind of look that will eventually lead to cavalry charges. You step closer to the bed. In the flickering light, the king's face has softened, features drifting into equal parts exhaustion and peace. For the first time, he doesn't look like a portrait. He looks human. A faint smile, carved by muscle memory perhaps, hovers on his lips, as though amused that the gods accepted his challenge after all. A drop of perfumed oil slips from the funeral burner onto the floor and sizzles. You realize the sound fills the vast chamber, the tiniest hiss carrying farther than speeches. Power, once so thunderous, reduced to chemistry. Perdiccas throws one last look toward the hand resting motionless on silk. "Take care of the body," he orders softly. The soul's already gone to negotiate. Servants bow and scatter. Someone drapes a white cloth over the king, the fabric settling like calm water over a storm that has finally decided to drown itself. You linger as the others file out. The torchlight dims once more, and the wind brushes the curtains aside. Outside the balcony, Babylon glows faintly under cloudlight, vast, glittering, oblivious. You look back at the still figure, the motionless fingers that once pointed armies toward glory. They lie there now, silent, still granting direction, a slanted, fragile reminder that conquest ends exactly where breath does. And from that lifeless hand, the empire begins to slip, quietly, decisively, like sand through an open palm. Chapter 21, The Stolen Body. Syria, somewhere along the old road that winds between desert and legend. The sky above is hopelessly huge, a sheet of hammered brass reflecting sun and silence. On it crawls a funeral procession so opulent that even the vultures seem impressed. At its center rolls the great golden carriage, the one built to carry not merely a corpse, but an empire. Its design borders on blasphemy and interior decoration, walls of shining metal embossed with scenes of conquest, lions with ruby eyes the size of thumbs, and carved cherubs struggling under the weight of actual history.
A canopy of gold leaf shades what used to be Alexander the Great, sealed within a crystal sarcophagus that glimmers like an accusation. The procession moves slowly, led by Macedonian soldiers who have long since traded tears for discipline. The air is thick with caravan dust, incense smoke, and muttered speculation about who actually gave the orders. Officially, the body is destined for Macedon, the homeland. Unofficially, every general along the route has their own private version of final resting place. You ride alongside the convoy, half observer, half stunned tourist. Even from your saddle, the heat feels personal, pressing down with the weight of divine bureaucracy. The gold of the carriage throws darts of light across the desert, a moving sun chasing itself. At midday, they stop among low dunes to rest the oxen. The soldiers slump in shade, trying not to admit exhaustion. Their commander, a grizzled man named Leonatus, checks the bindings on the carriage wheels with obsessive precision. Power, after all, now rides inside. That's when they arrive. A contingent of men cloaked in linen and confidence, their banners marked with the falcon sigil of Egypt. They approach without stealth, dust clouds rising behind them like applause. Their leader, Ptolemy, the same sly general who once toasted Alexander's victories and is now rehearsing his own, dismounts gracefully, sweat beading on his brow in the pattern of ambition. Leonatus steps forward, hand on sword hilt. "You're far from Memphis, friend." Ptolemy smiles the kind of smile that could fund a coup. "Not far enough," he says. "I come to relieve you of a burden, a sacred one." Around them the soldiers bristle, thinking of pay scales and afterlives. The desert holds its breath. "No blood," Ptolemy says smoothly, spreading his hands. "We are all still brothers, bound by his greatness. But Macedonia is far, too far. He belongs in Egypt where the gods may receive him properly." Leonatus hesitates. Technically, they're both Macedonian. Technically, so was Alexander. Technically, no one here can define properly in a way that doesn't involve swords. But Ptolemy's troops outnumber his, and even discipline bends to mathematics. Leonatus scowls, spits into the sand, and finally nods. So long as the king rests in peace, he will, Ptolemy replies lightly, and magnificently. The exchange happens in the open, without drama, a theft disguised as courtesy. The Egyptians move in, efficient as stagehands, redirecting the oxen onto a new course. Within an hour, the convoy is theirs, the banner of Egypt unfurling against the light like a brass halo. You watch the transition in stunned awe. No battle, no fanfare, just a change of theater ownership. The dead king shifts direction with the quiet inevitability of history's finest irony. As they move south toward the Nile, the desert wind rises, swirling over the empty ruts left behind. Behind you, the abandoned Macedonian soldiers stare after the retreating carriages, lips cracked with thirst and disbelief. Somewhere in the procession, Ptolemy raises a canteen in salute to the shimmering horizon. "To Alexander," he says softly, "to the man who still conquers, even in silence." His men laugh uncertainly. Humor feels forbidden this close to ghosts. Night falls, patient and blue. The golden carriage glows by lamplight like a traveling shrine, throwing soft halos into the darkness. You ride alongside once more, listening to the desert's mild applause, the whisper of sand sliding against sand. In the end, there is no pursuit, only rumors flitting like moths across kingdoms. That Egypt stole a god, that Egypt stole a god, that Macedon was robbed of its heart, that somewhere the king himself smirks from his crystal tomb, because stealing him was, finally, the most Alexander thing anyone could have done. The procession continues southward, smaller now against the vast plain, but bright enough to be mistaken for a star fallen to earth. And if you squint just right, you could almost believe that the man inside is still leading the way. One last campaign through eternity, with thieves for pallbearers and ambition for a compass.
Chapter 22. The Carpet Unfurls. The Palace of Alexandria breathes perfume and rumor in equal measure. Columns painted with lapis and gold gleam in the afternoon light, while eunuchs glide over mosaic floors designed specifically to make lesser mortals feel clumsy. Outside, the Nile curls lazily past marble docks, unaware that history is once again about to stretch itself across the landscape in a fit of drama. Inside, Julius Caesar is not expecting company. He's pacing his audience chamber, muttering Latin to himself about taxes, betrayal, and heartburn. The usual Roman cocktail. His armor glints, only mostly polished, and a secretary stands nearby pretending to take notes while secretly debating the meaning of "when in Egypt." A line of servants enter, bearing gifts from the young queen, Cleopatra VII, survivor, politician, scholar, and full-time chaos enthusiast. The gifts are what one expects: baskets of fruit, jars of honey, gold idols which may also function as bribes. But then comes the last item: a large, rolled carpet so ornate it could finance a small war. Two attendants haul it forward with the solemnity of men carrying either treasure or terrible plans. They set it on the floor. The head servant bows. A final gift from Her Majesty. The Romans exchange glances. Caesar raises an eyebrow. Does it sing? The servant backs away without answering, which, in any century, is a reliable sign of incoming spectacle. The room holds its breath. Suddenly the carpet stirs. The layers unfurl with a rustle of silk and suspense, rolling outward like destiny in slow motion. When it finally spills open, there she is, Cleopatra herself, rising from the folds as though the luxury had simply decided to manifest a queen. For a moment, the entire room forgets how to conjugate verbs. Cleopatra stands gracefully, brushing stray threads from her hair, eyes sparkling with theatrical satisfaction. "Apologies for the entrance," she says, in Greek smooth as honey. "Your guards were quite determined that I wouldn't see you. This seemed efficient." Caesar blinks once, twice. The Roman word for "are you kidding me?" fails him completely. He's 60-something, weathered by campaigns, scarred by ambition, and yet nothing in his long career of stabbing, conquering, or governing has prepared him for the diplomatic weapon that is Cleopatra's smile. The silence stretches awkwardly. Somewhere in the corner, a scribe drops his stylus, possibly from fainting, possibly from taking frantic notes for tomorrow's gossip. Cleopatra continues as if this were a standard mode of greeting. "I bring no armies, no threats, only a conversation." She moves closer, the scent of lotus and confidence filling the room, and perhaps an invitation to coexist. Caesar's Roman instincts wrestle visibly with his human ones. "You risked your life entering this palace in deception," he says finally.
"Deception?" she replies, feigning innocence. "Merely creative diplomacy. You Romans admire initiative, do you not?" He coughs out a laugh, half admiration, half disbelief. "I admire survival," he says, "and evidently so do you." Servants vanish as if by spell, leaving only the two of them among swaths of silk and scattered rose leaves that weren't there a minute ago. Cleopatra seats herself casually on the unfurled carpet, the world's most magnificent stage prop, and gestures for him to sit. "Now," she says, "shall we discuss Egypt's future or Rome's curiosity?" Caesar hesitates, then drops into a chair opposite her. He knows a political storm when he sees one, but this storm wears eyeliner and speaks fluent alliance. Hours pass in negotiation that's half philosophy, half flirtation. They weave words the way others weave nets, carefully, with intent to entangle. Every statement is bait, every pause a test. Outside, the palace hums as servants whisper the story to anyone willing to pay for a preview of tomorrow's scandal. When the meeting ends,
Caesar stands, eyes sharper, mouth curved in something dangerously akin to admiration. "You have spirit," he admits. "And you," says Cleopatra, rising like the final act of a well-rehearsed play, "have options. Perhaps we can trade." She leaves the way she arrived, through the door this time, though everyone suspects future entrances will be just as memorable. Later, when the chamber empties, the rolled carpet lies abandoned on the marble floor, its edges still warm from the performance. A Roman centurion mutters, "She could have just asked for an appointment." The secretary, recovering his composure, replies, "Yes, but then we wouldn't be talking about her for the next 2,000 years." Outside, the evening sun sets over the Nile, streaking it with gold. Somewhere on a balcony, Cleopatra smiles to herself, not triumphantly, but knowingly, as if history were already hers, and Caesar simply hadn't been informed yet.
Chapter 23. The Siege of Smoke and Strategy. Now Alexandria burns. The harbor roars while Caesar's troops defend history's most inconvenient relationship. Beside him, Cleopatra adjusts her crown with the calm of someone who already knows she'll be played by every actress ever. You duck behind a column and promise the gods you'll never complain about deadlines again. The air is equal parts salt, smoke, and hubris. The great library, once a perfect labyrinth of scrolls and whispers, has become a torch. Flames march across papyrus shelves like scholars arguing, each trying to outshine the other. You can almost hear the crackling debates of lost philosophers dissolving into ash. Caesar's men shout commands in Latin that sound too clean for what's happening. Engines of war grind against marble, the sea thrashes against the piers, and everything sacred seems to bow beneath the weight of human ambition. Cleopatra, somehow unsinged, surveys the chaos as if she's reviewing a script. Her eyes flick from the horizon to Caesar, then briefly rest on you, a messenger, a bystander, or perhaps a reluctant chronicler of events that none of you will quite survive in the same way. You wonder what she sees in you. Another pawn in her persuasive theater, someone to bear witness that she was more than legend, more than a footnote wedged between male victories. Caesar is analyzing the city like a strategist who truly believes that fire can be reasoned with. He paces between columns, every gesture edged in the impatience of empire. "Contain the blaze along the royal quarter," he shouts, as if mere volume could undo catastrophe. The command ricochets off the marble like an accusation. You can see the denial forming behind his eyes, how history will someday reshape this moment into an accidental calamity instead of a personal one. Between you and the queen, a messenger collapses, armor steaming from seawater and sweat. He carries news of reinforcements, or surrender, or maybe just exhaustion. None of it matters. Alexandria is writing its own end, manuscript by manuscript, flame by flame. The harbor's reflection becomes a mirror of red and gold. Fishing boats drift like small prayers across it, caught in the crosswinds of myth. Ships burn with the dignity of loyal servants, masts bending softly as they die. You think of the years spent building them, of sailors carving their names into the decks, certain their stories would travel farther than the tide. Cleopatra speaks then, her voice cutting through the chaos with eerie precision. "Even smoke has a strategy," she murmurs, not to anyone in particular. It finds the highest point, makes the world notice, and then disappears. You blink, uncertain whether she's talking about the library or herself. Caesar doesn't answer. He's too busy remembering that empires burn from the inside first. Ash starts drifting like snow. It settles on your hair, on your hands, on the notes you were supposed to deliver to one of Caesar's scribes. The paper's edges curl, words blurring into abstract poetry. You could save them, but a strange calm stops you. Maybe some knowledge is meant to vanish, to give the next generation a reason to rediscover it. Somewhere beyond the smoke, the city still breathes, merchants securing their stalls, children hiding under stone archways, cats slinking through alleys like embers that refused extinction. Life refuses to take a hint. You step from behind your column and cross toward the Queen. "Shall I record what happens next?" you ask, half in jest, half in fear. She smiles, not at you, but at the centuries ahead. "Record it," she says. "But remember, the winner decides what counts as truth." Another explosion from the harbor rattles the air. A gust of wind sends sparks spinning skyward, constellations forming briefly before fading. You imagine some future scholar gazing up, naming new stars after the scrolls that were lost tonight. Cleopatra turns away from the flames, her silhouette etched in bronze light. "Let Caesar think he's saving Rome," she says quietly. "I'm saving my story." As the fire howls across roofs and colonnades, you realize she already has. History will remember her, wrongly, colorfully, endlessly, but it will remember. And in that realization, amid the ruin of Alexandria, you understand that the true siege here isn't fought with swords or ships, but with narrative itself. You grip your stylus tighter, coughing as the smoke rolls past. Somewhere behind you, someone prays. Somewhere ahead, someone lies. Between the two, you keep writing. Chapter 24. Cleopatra in Rome. Rome stops and stares. Cleopatra strolls its marble avenues wrapped in gold, linen, and controversy. Senators choke on their figs, housewives whisper. You walk a few paces behind, realizing this is what happens when confidence meets empire. Everyone looks, and nobody blinks. The morning city hums like a hive disturbed. Market stalls pause mid-haggle, bread sellers lowering their baskets as if offering tribute. The air smells of olives, dust, and disbelief. Romans pride themselves on being unimpressed by foreign spectacle. But Cleopatra doesn't simply arrive, she occupies the space around her. Every step seems choreographed by a goddess who has seen the script and knows exactly when the camera will pan. Beside her, Caesar radiates satisfaction disguised as policy. He calls it diplomacy. The Senate calls it scandal. The Queen of Egypt walks in his shadow, yet somehow redirects the sunlight entirely onto herself. A child drops a wooden toy as she passes, and his mother hushes him, not out of fear, but reverence. Cleopatra's reputation has already galloped ahead through gossip: seductress, scholar, sorceress, survivor. By the time she reaches the Forum, she has been every version of herself and their opposites. You follow, pretending to be dispassionate, just another clerk recording historic decorum. But you're aware that this is less a political visit and more an audition for immortality. Rome is watching, assessing, calculating. It measures her jewelry against its own ambition, trying to decide whether she's a threat, a muse, or a mirror. At the steps of the Curia, senators cluster like startled pigeons. Cicero's thin lips tighten. Others whisper numbers, alliances, dowries, losses, titles. Cleopatra does not address them. She glides forward, her perfume rewriting the air. The older men avert their eyes, though curiosity tugs at them like a child pulling a sleeve. Rome has conquered continents, but tonight it learns what it feels like to be conquered by poise. Caesar, ever strategic, introduces her as a guest of the Republic, which fools no one. A guest does not live in the villa across the Tiber filled with Egyptian servants, silks, and rumors. Cleopatra's small entourage unfurls like a painting come to life. Eunuchs, scholars, interpreters, attendants carrying trays carved like lotus petals. Every detail seems designed to remind the Romans that Egypt is both older
and more unapologetically alive than their marble order. Later, at a banquet, gold plates glint beneath torchlight. The wine pours dark and thick, heavy with invitation. Caesar laughs more than usual. Senators force it louder still. Cleopatra listens, saying little, until a junior magistrate makes an ill-considered joke about serpents, Nile storms, and feminine wiles. Without changing expression, she raises her cup and asks, "In your myths, does the serpent tempt or teach?" The table falls silent. You suspect even the statues would like to applaud. Beyond the feasts, Rome buzzes with new vocabulary, eyeliner and incense, processions through moonlit gardens, music that bends time. The poets write like madmen. The wives of senators copy her hairstyles in secret. Even the temples begin to smell faintly of lotus and ambition. You can sense the city shifting, its confidence rearranging itself to make room for her story. You begin to record everything. The way she laughs at Caesar's Latin puns, how she strokes the carved lions outside his villa, how she studies every Roman custom as though filing it for later use. She is learning the empire's weaknesses, not to exploit, but to understand. Power, you realize, isn't about force. It's about the illusion of choice presented by someone who never has to ask. One evening, as dusk slips across the Tiber, you find her alone on the terrace, watching the red roofs fade into violet haze. "Do they hate me?" she asks without looking at you. "Some do," you admit. "The rest are pretending they don't." She smiles faintly. "Then they are already mine." You don't answer. The wind moves through the cypress trees, whispering like an audience afraid to clap too soon. Somewhere below, Rome carries on, arguing, trading, worshipping its own endurance. Cleopatra watches it all as if measuring the empire's pulse, deciding whether it beats fast enough to keep up with her. In time, there will be assassins, rebellions, and headlines carved into marble that call her everything but clever. Yet for this moment, in this city of stone, the woman from the Nile walks as though she invented gravity, and Rome, deep down, believes her. Chapter 25. The Anointing. In a silent Egyptian workshop, the air trembles with the scent of resin, myrrh, and solemn patience. Oil lamps flicker against walls painted with gods who have long learned to keep secrets. In one corner, a craftsman grinds gold leaf into dust so fine it seems more like captured sunlight than metal. The ritual is both art and endurance, a conversation between devotion and decay. A woman stands at the center, her outline dressed in white linen that catches every thread of flame. It is Cleopatra, the once crowned, once feared, now rumored queen. She stands barefoot among her servants, steady but not still. From the wide doorway, the Nile presses its humid breath into the room, carrying whispers from beyond the walls. Roman banners on the horizon, echoing disputes of men who still argue over her memory. But here, time folds inward. The world outside, its politics, its marble, its endless proclamations, fades against the hum of preparation. The embalmer bows, motioning for silence deeper than death itself. You, the chronicler, watch from the shadows, unsure whether this is ceremony or resignation. Cleopatra raises her hand, gesturing toward the sacred table where ointments lie sealed in alabaster jars. "Begin," she says softly, and the word seems to awaken the very air. The attendants approach with measured reverence, their movements outlined by centuries of practice. The ritual is meant for kings, but history has already decided she transcends titles. First comes the perfumed oil of cedar, symbol of incorruptibility. It's brushed across her arms, over the pale map of veins that once held the pulse of empires. Then, frankincense, burned in slow spirals so fragrant it nearly conjures tears. "To purify the soul," someone murmurs. Cleopatra almost smiles. "Or disguise it," she replies.
Her humor, even edged with fatalism, remains indomitable. Outside, thunder mutters over Alexandria's ruins. You remember the fire, the ships, the scrolls reduced to sighing ash. Now another ending begins, less violent, more deliberate, but no less consuming. Cleopatra's eyes meet yours briefly, and you understand. This is not surrender, it is authorship. She will control even how she disappears. The high priest steps forward, carrying a flask of lotus oil. His hair is silver, his voice a low, practiced chant. For renewal, he chants. For awakening beyond the threshold. The queen nods, absorbing every syllable as though reviewing her final act. Each oil is symbolic. Amber for memory, cinnamon for clarity, honey for divine grace. The attendants rub the mixture onto her temples and into her dark hair, weaving fragrance into fate. You record each detail. The rhythmic tapping of bronze ladles, the faint hiss as incense meets ember, the quiet determination of a woman turning legend into ritual. History will write what it pleases, she says at last, as though responding to a question no one dared. Voice. But this moment is mine. You hesitate before replying. Will they understand? They won't need to, she says. They'll feel it, like perfume that lingers after the wearer has gone. One of her attendants produces small vials filled with crushed lapis and malachite. Color seeps into her palms, staining them with celestial blue and royal green. These pigments have an older purpose, not vanity, but protection. To the Egyptians, color is language. Blue guards the soul. Green invokes rebirth. Cleopatra seems to be writing her own epilogue in shade and scent. A soft rustle breaks the rhythm, the sound of linen shifting as she kneels before the altar of Isis. The statue looms above, serene and mercilessly maternal. Cleopatra bows her head. Mother of beginnings and endings, she whispers. Let both be beautiful. You swear the torches bend closer, listening. Outside, soldiers may already be near. Rome is a patient predator, glory an even hungrier one. But none of that matters here, within these scented walls where mortality and mythology share the same breath. The last drop of myrrh falls onto her skin and gleams like a captured star. The air seems to sigh in completion. The priest steps back. It is done, he intones. Cleopatra opens her eyes. No, she says, voice calm as sand under moonlight. It has only begun. You lower your stylus, realizing she's right. The anointing isn't a farewell, it's a transformation. In the silence that follows, history itself seems to kneel. And that's where we'll leave them tonight. Those wanderers through smoke and empire, the accused witches who walked quietly into English fog searching for safety, and the young conqueror whose last breath built 1,000 rumors. Their lives were built from the same pieces ours are: fear, hope, stubbornness, and the occasional spark of humor that keeps existence bearable. It's strange to think how exhausting an ordinary day used to be. You could survive the plague, dodge a suspicious neighbor, mash herbs by candlelight, and still worry about your roof leaking before dawn. In another world, you might have been a sailor, a scribe, or a farmer fighting with cold mud and brittle crops. History, for all its grandeur, was mostly people trying to get through another sunrise without dying of something preventable. And yet, they persisted. They learned, rebuilt, passed down stories, and found moments to laugh in taverns or under starlight. The resilience that stitched their centuries together is the same quiet strength that brought us here, into the warm hum of electricity and clean sheets, where our greatest nightly challenge is finding a comfortable pillow position. So, take a slow breath. Let your shoulders loosen. You are the descendant of survivors, of clever, tired, endlessly resourceful humans who did their best with what they had. Be grateful for the softness of the present moment.
The steady pulse of technology, the safety of locked doors, the fact that sleeping isn't an act of faith anymore. Close your eyes. The past can keep itself busy for a while. You've earned your rest. Good night.